Imagine for a moment that the life you are living right now is a dream you once had. A dream you can still shape while you're wide awake. Every thought flickering through your mind is a brushstroke on the canvas of tomorrow, and the colors you choose determine whether the scene becomes a masterpiece or a scribble. And this audiobook is your gentle alarm clock, your invitation to wake up inside the dream and start painting with intention. Over the next hours together, we will walk through the hidden architecture of the human mind, uncover the science that proves your thoughts are not passive whispers, but active architects, and weave in stories from desert sages, city sidewalks, and cutting-edge laboratories, so that by the end you will hold the blueprint to redesign any room in the house of your reality. You do not need to believe everything you hear right away. You only need to stay curious, because curiosity is the first spark of change. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Invisible Sculptor. Long before anyone spoke the word neuron, a child in ancient Mesopotamia pressed a reed stylus into wet clay and discovered that a single mark could outlast an empire. That child was the first to glimpse what you and I now live inside every day, the power of a pattern to shape the world. Your mind is that stylus, and the soft clay is the delicate web of connections between your 100 billion brain cells. Every time you think a thought, feel an emotion, or repeat a behavior, you are etching a groove a little deeper, strengthening a pathway that makes the same thought easier to think again tomorrow. Neuroscientists call this experience-dependent neuroplasticity, a phrase that sounds clinical until you realize it means your brain is a living sculpture that reshapes itself in real time to reflect the life you keep rehearsing. Picture a taxi driver in London navigating the tangle of 25,000 streets without a map. Researchers once slid those drivers into MRI machines and watched their hippocampi, the seahorse-shaped nubs that store spatial memories, glow larger than average. The longer the drivers had been on the job, the bigger the glow. Their daily loops through left turns and roundabouts had literally grown new brain tissue. Now consider the quieter loops you run, the way you brace for criticism before a meeting, the reflex to scroll when boredom nips, the story that money always slips through your fingers. Each loop is a taxi route, and your brain is expanding to make the ride smoother, whether the destination serves you or not. There is a tale from the Sufi tradition about a man who carried water in a sieve. Every morning he walked to the river, filled the sieve, and by the time he reached his garden, every drop had leaked away. His neighbor laughed and offered a bucket, but the man refused. "The walk is teaching my arms patience," he said, "and the empty sieve reminds me that what matters is the carrying, not the keeping." One dawn, a wandering dervish watched the ritual and asked to borrow the sieve. He filled it, then tilted it so the water streamed in a perfect arc that caught the sunrise and scattered light across the path like spilled coins. The man stared, suddenly seeing his useless tool as a prism. That night he dreamed of rivers running through his hands without loss, and when he woke, he found the sieve transformed into a silver bowl that never emptied. The story is not about magic, it is about perspective. The same brain that can thicken a hippocampus from taxi turns can thicken a pathway of lack from years of sieve thinking, or it can thicken a pathway of abundance the moment you tilt the angle of attention. Modern science gives us the tilt. Functional MRI studies show that when people spend just 12 minutes visualizing piano scales, the motor cortex regions responsible for finger movement expand almost as much as if they had physically practiced. The brain does not fully distinguish between doing and vividly imagining, which means your inner rehearsal studio is open 24 hours, free of charge. A saleswoman afraid of cold calls once spent a week closing her eyes for 5 minutes before lunch, picturing herself dialing with calm curiosity, hearing the prospect laugh at her joke, feeling the easy yes. On the 8th day, she made 30 calls and booked 4 meetings, a personal record. She swears the only variable that changed was the movie playing behind her eyelids. The invisible sculptor had been handed a new chisel. Yet the sculptor is not a tyrant. It is a servant awaiting instruction. The catch is that most instructions arrive unconsciously, slipped in by headlines, childhood echoes, the mood of the last person you spoke to. To take the chisel yourself, begin with ruthless kindness toward the grooves already carved. Judgment calcifies them. Gentle awareness dissolves the glue. Try this tonight. Lie in bed and replay one small moment from your day that felt heavy. Instead of scolding yourself for the stumble, watch the scene like a film on a screen 6 feet away. Notice the color of the light, the temperature of the air, the exact sentence that tightened your chest. Neuroimaging reveals that this observer stance activates the prefrontal cortex while quieting the amygdala's alarm, literally rewiring the emotional charge in real time. Do it for 90 seconds, and you have begun the first cut of a new sculpture. The chapter's pulse is simple but fierce. Your brain believes what you repeat, and it builds the body, the habits, and the outer world to match. A single mother in Detroit once told me she repeated to her mirror every morning, "I am the calm my children need." 6 months later, her 10-year-old son, who used to hide during arguments, started saying it to his little sister when she cried. The mother's brain had grown calmer pathways. The child's mirror neurons had copied the pattern. The household reality had shifted without a single budget increase or move across town. The invisible sculptor works in families, teams, entire cultures, but it always starts inside one's skull. As the sun set on that first day, the Mesopotamian child pressed a second mark beside the first, then a third, until the clay tablet told a tiny story of a boat on a river. Thousands of years later, you wake up, open your eyes, and the river is still flowing, waiting for today's mark. The science says the stylus is in your hand. The stories say the river will carry whatever you etch, and the quiet voice you are learning to trust says the next groove is yours to choose. Chapter 2: The Echo Chamber of Identity. The first time I met Elena, she introduced herself as the anxious one. She said it the way other people say, "I'm a Libra," or "I'm from Ohio," as if it were a fixed coordinate on a map. We were standing in the lobby of a conference center in Portland, rain tapping the glass roof like impatient fingers, and she laughed nervously while twisting the sleeve of her sweater. "It's just who I am," she added, as though apologizing for the weather. I smiled and asked what would happen if for the next hour she introduced herself as the curious one instead. She blinked, the sleeve stopped moving, and something flickered across her face. Part fear, part wonder, like a deer deciding whether the clearing is safe. That flicker is the doorway we are about to walk through. Identity is not a name tag, it is an echo chamber. Every time you say, "I am," the walls of the chamber vibrate, sending the message back louder, richer, more convincing. Neuroscientists have mapped the neural real estate of selfhood in a shimmering web called the default mode network, a constellation of brain regions that lights up when you daydream, reminisce, or narrate your life to yourself. It is the quiet DJ spinning the soundtrack of me. Feed it a diet of "I'm anxious," and it remixes every heartbeat, every email ping, every sideways glance into evidence for the track. Feed it "I'm curious," and the same heartbeat becomes a drum roll of possibility. The chamber does not care which song is true, it only cares which song is on repeat. Long ago, in the high plateaus of the Andes, a boy named Kuyuchi was born with a twisted foot. The village shamans declared him marked by Pachamama for a special path, but the children called him Stonefoot and left him out of races. His mother, a weaver of intricate belts, watched her son limp to the edge of the fields every evening and sit alone, tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick, One twilight, she joined him and asked what he was drawing. "The mountain that walks," he said, pointing to a jagged line that rose, dipped, and rose again. She studied the sketch, then took his stick and added a tiny llama beside the mountain. "Every mountain needs a companion," she said. The next day she wove the image into a belt and tied it around his waist. "Wear your mountain," she told him. "Let it remind you that even crooked paths reach the sky." Kyuchi grew into a man whose limp never straightened, yet travelers began seeking him out. They said no one could read the weather in the clouds like Stonefoot, no one could predict safe passages through rock slides. He became the village guide, paid in potatoes and respect. When asked how a boy left behind in races became the one who led strangers across treacherous heights, he touched the faded belt and answered, "My mother taught me that the mountain walks inside me, the foot only follows." The echo chamber of his childhood had tried to play broken, but a single story woven in thread and spoken in love retuned the frequency to whole. Modern laboratories echo the same truth with colder instruments. In a study at Stanford, researchers asked hotel maids if they considered their work exercise. Most laughed and said no. They cleaned rooms. They didn't work out. The scientists measured fitness markers, weight, blood pressure, waist-to-hip ratio, then split the maids into two groups. One group received a short presentation explaining that vacuuming burns as many calories as a moderate gym session, that making beds meets Surgeon General guidelines for aerobic activity. The other group heard nothing. 4 weeks later, the informed group had lost weight, lowered blood pressure, and trimmed waistlines without changing a single behavior. Their bodies had begun obeying a new identity. "I am someone whose job keeps me fit." The echo chamber rewrote physiology. You can feel the chamber humming right now. Pause and notice the quiet sentence that just floated through. Maybe I'm tired, maybe I'm behind, maybe I'm the kind of person who... Whatever it was, it arrived wearing the crown of truth. But crowns are chosen, not inherited. The neurochemical glue that makes an identity stick is dopamine, the molecule of reward and prediction. Every time the brain accurately predicts what happens next. See, I knew they'd ignore my idea. It releases a tiny squirt of dopamine, reinforcing the neural pathway like a gambler pulling a winning lever. The prediction does not have to be pleasant. It only has to be familiar. Familiar equals safe, and the primitive brain will choose safe over happy every time, unless a wiser voice intervenes. That wiser voice belongs to the narrator, not the character. Imagine your life as a movie. For years you have been both the actor on screen and the voiceover describing the action. Here comes Sarah, who always says the wrong thing. The actor winces, the audience, your own mind, nods in recognition, and the scene locks into script. But what happens if you step into the projection booth and rewrite the voiceover mid-scene? Here comes Sarah, who is about to discover something surprising. The actor straightens, the audience leans forward, and the dopamine now rewards curiosity instead of cringe. The plot is free to improvise. Tech founder named Marcus once hired me to coach his executive team. In our first session, he strode in wearing a black turtleneck and the faint scent of impatience. "We move fast and break things," he announced, quoting the Silicon Valley Creed. Translation: mistakes are inevitable, feelings are friction. Within weeks, the culture had calcified into blame and burnout. I asked Marcus to spend one day narrating his company aloud as if he were the documentary voice of David Attenborough. He laughed, then tried it. Walking past engineers hunched over laptops, he whispered into his phone, "Observe the rare Homo innovatus in its native habitat, foraging for elegant code." By lunch he was grinning at the absurdity, and by dinner he had recorded a 3-minute clip for the team's Slack. The replies poured in, emojis, inside jokes, one developer adding a wildlife photograph of himself with cartoon antlers. The echo chamber had been handed a new microphone, and the frequency shifted from break to play. Quarterly turnover dropped 30% in the following year. The turtleneck stayed, but the tension loosened. Ancient traditions understood the microphone intuitively. In the Zen monasteries of Japan, a monk receiving a new name during ordination is told, "Die to your old self, be reborn in this sound." The name is chanted aloud for days until the syllables overwrite the former identity, like waves erasing footprints. Neuroscience now explains why. Auditory repetition activates the superior temporal gyrus and loops into the default mode network, literally rehearsing the brain into a new self-story. You do not need a monastery. Try this experiment for 7 mornings. Stand in front of a mirror, look yourself in the eye, and speak one sentence that feels 1 degree braver than yesterday. I am learning to trust my decisions. I am becoming the calm in the storm. Say it until the words taste less like costume and more like skin. On day 4, notice how the sentence finishes itself in unexpected moments, while stuck in traffic, while drafting an email. The echo chamber is learning the lyrics. But echoes can also trap. Elena, the anxious one from Portland, returned for a second workshop 6 months later. She walked in wearing the same sweater, but the sleeve was no longer twisted. "I tried your game," she said. "I became the curious one for a day, then a week. It felt fake at first, like wearing someone else's coat. Then I noticed something terrifying. The old coat still fit perfectly. Anxiety slid right back in the minute I stopped paying attention." She had discovered the gravity of identity, how fiercely the chamber defends its architecture. We sat on the floor of the empty conference room, and I asked her to draw the coat. She sketched a heavy trench coat with deep pockets labeled, "Proof I'm broken," "Evidence I'll fail," "Memories of panic attacks." Then I handed her colored markers and invited her to redesign it. Slowly, pockets became gardens, buttons became suns, the hem unfurled into roots. When she finished, the coat looked like a living thing. "Now wear it," I said. She closed her eyes and imagined slipping it on. A single tear slid down her cheek, not from sadness, but from the strange lightness of a different weight. Science calls this cognitive diffusion, the art of stepping back from the label so it becomes an object you can turn in your hands rather than a skin you must inhabit. Brain scans show that when people practice labeling emotions, I notice anxiety is visiting. The amygdala quiets while the prefrontal cortex lights up. Exactly the opposite of rumination's grip. Elena began a habit of texting herself 1 observation a day. Anxiety is loud in meetings but quiet in bookstores. Over months, the texts formed a gallery of evidence that anxiety was a weather pattern, not a personality. The chamber still echoed, but the walls had windows now. There is a lesser-known parable from the Navajo tradition about a girl who was born laughing. The elders said she carried the spirit of joy, but when she turned 7, a drought withered the corn, and her laughter stopped. Her grandmother took her to the canyon at dawn and pointed to the red rock walls. "Echo lives here," the grandmother said. "Shout anything and she returns it." The girl shouted, "Hello," and hello bounced back. She shouted, "I'm sad," and sadness returned, layered and larger. Finally, she whispered, "I remember joy," and the canyon whispered it back softer, truer. The girl began visiting every morning, practicing smaller and smaller truths, until the echo learned her new voice. By the time the rains returned, the village said the girl had brought them, but she knew the rain had simply iced inside her first. Your identity is that canyon. Shout, "I'm not enough," and the walls magnify lack until the sky feels low. Whisper, "I am becoming," and the return grows gentle wings. The volume is not fixed by childhood, trauma, or DNA. It is tuned by attention. A CEO I coached named David discovered this after a boardroom coup left him unemployed at 55. For weeks he woke at 3 a.m. rehearsing the meeting where they voted him out, each replay carving the identity failure deeper. Then one night, sleepless, he opened a notebook and wrote a single question: who might I become on the other side of this? The next morning he wrote it again. By day 10, the question had spawned answers: mentor, writer, philanthropist, each a tentative echo. He began volunteering at a startup incubator, offering the wisdom they once paid him millions to deliver. Within a year, he had co-founded a venture that funded clean water projects in 3 countries. When journalists asked how he recovered so fast, he smiled and said, I stopped arguing with the echo and started teaching it a new song. The teaching requires rhythm, not force. Identities shift like seasons, not light switches. Think of the brain's white matter tracts as underground root systems. Water them consistently and they thicken, divert, bloom. Inconsistent watering leaves brittle stubs. A practical rhythm looks like this. 3 daily touch points. Morning, speak the new echo aloud, even if it quivers. Midday, catch the old echo in the act and gently rename it. That's the old radio station. I'm scanning for something new. Evening, write 1 line of evidence that the new echo appeared, however faintly. A client who followed this for 90 days moved from I'm a procrastinator to I'm a person who finishes what matters, and her unpublished novel reached the end on day 91. The chamber had not been demolished. It had been renovated, room by room. Yet renovation stirs dust. Expect resistance. The old identity will bargain, threaten, seduce. It knows your soft spots because it built them. When Eleanor's anxiety flared before a presentation, it whispered, remember who you really are. She felt the trench coat trying to slide back on. Instead of fighting, she invited the coat to tea. Hello, old friend, she said silently. I see you're scared I'll embarrass us. Thank you for trying to protect me all these years. You can rest now. I've got this. The anxiety did not vanish, but it shrank to the size of a guest rather than the homeowner. She delivered the presentation, stumbled twice, and received the loudest applause of the day. The echo chamber had learned a new hospitality. Hospitality extends outward. Identities are contagious. Mirror neurons fire when we watch someone embody a trait, priming our own circuitry to echo it. A yawn spreads, so does courage. A teacher in Chicago noticed her 5th graders mirroring her slumped shoulders and sigh each morning. She began standing tall and greeting each child by name with genuine delight. Within 2 weeks, the room's posture lifted. Within 2 months, the principal reported fewer behavioral referrals. The children were not mimicking a performance. They were downloading an identity upgrade through the silent Wi-Fi of presence. Your nervous system is a tuning fork, and the world is full of other forks waiting to resonate. There is a final, fierce subtlety. The most potent identity is not a noun but a verb. I am a writer can calcify into pressure. I am writing stays fluid. I am healing can feel like a verdict. I am healing invites process. Verbs keep the chamber doors open. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the instruction to the departing soul is not be free, but recognize the clear light as it arises. Recognition is action, moment by moment. A recovering addict I worked with replaced I am sober with I am choosing clarity right now. 20 years later, he still says it before every meeting. The echo never stagnates, it breathes. Elena sent me a photograph last month. She is standing on a stage, microphone in hand, sleeve untwisted, eyes bright. The caption read, Today I introduced myself as the one who helps others find their voice. The coat is in the closet now, but I kept the gardens. I zoomed in on the image and saw, tucked into her pocket, a tiny corner of colored marker peeking out. The cuff of the coat she once drew, now a bookmark in the story she keeps writing. The echo chamber hums, and the song is hers. As we leave this chapter, carry one small experiment into your evening. Before sleep, ask the canyon a single question. Who am I becoming tomorrow? Do not force an answer. Let the echo return whatever it will. Write it down, date it, close the book, return to it in a month, and notice how the walls have shifted. The mountain walks inside you, the coat is optional, the song is under construction, and the next note is already forming in the hush between heartbeats. Nandam, Chapter 3, The Garden of Attention. The first thing you notice about a garden is never the soil. It is the rose that caught the light, the tomato heavy on the vine, the single weed daring to impersonate a flower. Only later, when you kneel and part the leaves, do you see the dark cradle holding everything aloft. Attention is that cradle. It is the quiet, continuous decision about which seeds drink and which seeds starve. You do not need more willpower, more time, or more motivation. You need only to move the water, yet most of us water the weeds while praying for roses, then wonder why the garden looks wild. A monk once walked the length of the Silk Road carrying nothing but a bowl and a question, "What deserves my gaze?" In every bazaar he passed, merchants thrust silks and spices under his nose, children tugged his robe for coins, camels snorted clouds of dust across his path. He kept walking until he reached a cliff above the Indus River at sunset. There he sat, bowl in lap, and watched the water turn molten gold. A bandit who had followed him for days, hoping to rob the rumored holy man, crept close and saw the monk smiling at empty air. "What do you see that makes you rich?" the bandit demanded. The monk lifted his bowl and tilted it so the sunset poured inside. "I see the whole river in one drop," he said. The bandit stared, then laughed, then sat beside him. By morning he had traded his dagger for a walking stick and the question for a lifetime. Your attention is that bowl. It looks small, but it can hold an ocean if you aim it right. Cognitive science measures attention in milliseconds, how long the spotlight lingers before flickering elsewhere. The average human now holds it for 8 seconds, less than a goldfish, yet 8 seconds is enough to plant a seed. 8 seconds on a resentment, and the root splits the soil. 8 seconds on a possibility, and the shoot breaks through. The garden does not care about your intentions, it only reads the water. Picture a violinist in the New York subway. She opens her case, drops in a few seeds of change, and begins a Bach partita that once made kings weep. Commuters surge past like a river around a rock. One man in a pinstripe suit slows, listens for 4 measures, then hurries on. A child tugs his mother's coat and stands transfixed for the full 6 minutes. When the final note fades, the child drops a crumpled dollar into the case, the only bill all morning. The violinist later said she noticed the exact moment the child's eyes locked on hers. It felt like a door opening inside her chest. Attention is not passive observation, it is communion. Where it lands, energy follows, and energy is the currency of growth. Neuroscience names the doorway the reticular activating system, a pencil-thin bundle of neurons at the base of your brain that acts like a bouncer at an exclusive club. It decides which of the 11 million bits of sensory data bombarding you every second get past the velvet rope. Feed it a diet of danger, and it ushers in every siren, scowl, and breaking news alert, while screening out laughter, birdsong, and the friend waving across the street. Feed it a diet of wonder, and suddenly you notice the perfect cloud shaped like a whale, the stranger's shoes that match your mood, the idea that arrives uninvited and fully formed. The bouncer does not create the guests. It only chooses who enters the party already happening inside your skull. There is an old Cherokee story about a grandfather teaching his grandson on a winter evening. He builds a small fire and places 2 wolves on either side, one carved from ice, one from wood. Inside every heart, he says, live 2 wolves. One howls for fear, lack, and anger. The other howls for courage, plenty, and kindness. They are always fighting. The boy watches the ice wolf begin to drip. "Which one wins?" he asks. The grandfather pokes the fire closer to the wooden wolf. "The one you feed," he says. The ice wolf melts into a puddle. The wooden wolf catches a spark and burns warm all night. Attention is the poke of the stick. Modern life pokes relentlessly in the wrong direction. A push notification is a stick jab. A headline screaming collapse is a stick jab. The average smartphone user touches their screen 2,600 times a day. Each touch a micro decision about which wolf gets the flame. A marketing executive named Lila once calculated that her first hour awake delivered 180 pokes, texts, emails, news, weather, step count, Slack, Instagram likes. By 8 a.m., her nervous system felt like a piñata after the party. She decided to experiment with a single change. For the first 30 minutes after waking, she would water only one thing. Some days it was the orchid on her windowsill, watching dew tremble on a leaf. Some days it was her husband's sleeping face, noticing the new silver thread at his temple. Some days it was the silence itself, thick as bread. She kept a tally. On orchid days, her patience with clients lasted longer. On husband days, her laughter came easier. On silence days, her ideas arrived fully dressed. The garden began to reveal its preferences. Science backs the tally. Researchers at the University of Miami asked participants to spend 2 minutes noticing 3 novel details about a familiar coworker. The freckle shaped like Orion, the way they click a pen exactly twice before speaking. A week later, those participants reported higher trust and creative collaboration with that coworker, measurable in joint project output. The brain had tagged the person as rich landscape instead of background noise. Attention is the original social media. What you like grows. Yet the garden is clever. It knows how to grow plastic flowers that look real under fluorescent light. Social media algorithms are master gardeners, cultivating outrage because outrage keeps eyes on the screen, and eyes on the screen keep dollars in pockets. A study from MIT found that false news travels 6 times faster than truth on Twitter because lies trigger stronger arousal in the amygdala, which widens the reticular gate for anything emotionally charged. The wolves howl louder when they are lying. To reclaim the stick, you must become a suspicious botanist. Ask of every headline, every post, every thought, is this seed native to my soil, or was it engineered in someone else's greenhouse? A journalist named Matteo learned the question the hard way. His beat was political corruption, and for years he watered scoops of scandal until his byline became synonymous with outrage. Readers loved the hits of vindication. His editor loved the clicks, but his sleep curdled, his cynicism calcified, and one morning he caught himself hoping a senator would embezzle just to give him a front-page story. Shaken, he took a sabbatical and rented a cabin with no Wi-Fi. For the first week he paced like a caged wolf, refreshing phantom feeds. On day 8, he noticed a spider spinning a web between 2 pines. He sat for an hour watching silk emerge from spinnerets, measuring wind, adjusting tension. When the web caught the sunrise, it looked like a harp strung with light. Matteo laughed out loud for the first time in months. He spent the rest of the sabbatical photographing spider webs at dawn. When he returned to the newsroom, he pitched a series on urban pollinators, bees, bats, overlooked heroes. Circulation held steady, but reader comments shifted from venom to wonder. His editor was baffled. Matteo was reborn. The garden had pruned itself. Pruning is painful but precise. The brain's default is to let everything grow, every resentment, every distraction, every shiny object. Neuroplasticity favors density over quality unless you wield the shears. The shears are called selective attention, and their edge is sharpened by intention. An intention is not a wish. It is a pre-commitment of the spotlight. Elite athletes use it instinctively. A swimmer standing on the block does not think "don't false start." She thinks "explode off the beep." and the brain deletes every other noise. You can borrow the technique for any domain. Before opening email, set the intention, I will water 3 relationships today. Before a difficult conversation, I will water understanding, not victory. The reticular bouncer hears the guest list and starts turning away the crashers. There is a Buddhist practice called metta that waters on a cosmic scale. You begin by picturing someone you love and silently repeating, may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live with ease. Then you extend the wish to a neutral person, then to someone difficult, then to all beings. Brain scans of long-term metta practitioners show enlarged insular and temporoparietal junctions, regions tied to empathy and perspective-taking. Their gardens literally grow more space for others. A nurse in a pediatric oncology ward began a 5-minute metta practice during her commute. 6 months later, parents requested her by name, saying she somehow made the fluorescent halls feel softer. She insisted she'd done nothing except water kindness in rush hour traffic. Watering kindness sounds saccharine until you see it save a life. A veteran named Jonah returned from deployment with a mind full of thorns. Loud noises detonated memories. Grocery aisles felt like minefields. His wife begged him to try therapy, but he refused. They'll just water the trauma. Instead, he took a job at an animal shelter, figuring dogs wouldn't judge. On his 3rd day, a pit bull with scarred ears refused to eat. Jonah sat outside the kennel for an hour, not forcing, just being. The dog inched closer, sniffed his hand, and took a single kibble. Something cracked open in Jonah's chest. He began arriving early to sit with the hardest cases, dogs labeled unadoptable, aggressive, broken. He watered presence instead of pity. Within a year, the shelter's adoption rate for tough dogs tripled, and Jonah's nightmares thinned to once a month. He still flinches at fireworks, but he can stand in the cereal aisle now. The garden had cross-pollinated, attention given to the dogs grew safety inside the man. Cross-pollination is the garden's secret genius. What you water in one bed nourishes another. A graphic designer named Priya struggled with imposter syndrome every time she pitched a big client. She decided to water confidence in a different soil, her community garden plot. Every Saturday she showed up with seedlings and stories, teaching neighbors how to companion plant basil with tomatoes. Children trailed her like ducklings, repeating her phrases, roots need friends, until the phrase became a neighborhood motto. One Friday, mid-pitch to a Fortune 500 CEO, Priya heard her own voice waver. Without thinking, she pictured the basil leaning toward the tomato, roots intertwined underground. She smiled, relaxed, and said, think of your brand as Basil, strong alone, legendary with the right friends. The CEO laughed and signed the contract. The water had traveled through soil she never expected. Traveling water explains why gratitude journals work. You sit at night and write 3 things that went well. A stranger's smile, the perfect ripeness of a peach, the way your child pronounced library like library. The brain tags these moments as nutrients and begins scanning tomorrow for more. A longitudinal study at UC Davis found that people who kept gratitude journals for 10 weeks showed increased gray matter in the right inferior parietal lobule, a region tied to attention and emotional regulation. Their gardens literally thickened in the places that notice good. But gardens also need fallow time. Constant watering drowns. The Sabbath tradition across cultures is not moral nagging, it is agronomic wisdom. 1 day in 7, let the soil rest. A tech founder I coached instituted fallow Fridays. No screens, no strategy, just wandering. The first month, his team panicked. By month 3, they were volunteering at food banks, sketching on napkins, napping under redwoods. Quarterly profits rose 18%. And the founder said the real harvest was the silence that started showing up in Monday meetings, space where ideas could root before being yanked into PowerPoint. Silence is the underworld of the garden. Beneath the riot of color, mycorrhizal fungi weave a network trading carbon for phosphorus, warning of pests, sharing water during the drought. Scientists call it the Wood Wide Web. Your attention has an underground equivalent, the salience network, a subway system connecting the insula, anterior cingulate, and amygdala. It runs whether you notice or not, ferrying resources to whatever you have tagged as important. Starve it of quiet, and it grows brittle, prone to hijacking by the loudest signal. Feed it silence, and it becomes a superhighway for insight. Einstein credited his best ideas to long walks where he thought of nothing. The garden was speaking underground. A poet in Kyoto once kept a rock garden of 15 stones. Visitors asked why so few. He answered, so the mind can rest between them. He raked the gravel every dawn, creating ripples that suggested waves without water. One winter, a snowstorm buried the ripples. The poet did not rake. Instead, he sat inside, watching snow pile on stone until only the tops showed like islands. When spring came, the gravel bore faint scars where snow had pressed. The poet left them. Now the garden remembers winter, he said. Attention remembers everything it touches. The scars become soil. Your scars are soil too. A widow named Beatrice lost her husband to a sudden stroke. For months she watered grief until it choked every other plant. Then one afternoon she found his old camera and on impulse walked to the park where they used to feed ducks. She lifted the viewfinder and saw the world in rectangles of light. She began photographing ordinary things, cracked sidewalks, a child's balloon snagged in a tree, the exact blue of grief in a stranger's coat. She printed the photos and pinned them above her kitchen table. Slowly, visitors noticed. The cracks formed a map. The balloon became a heart. The blue coat carried a smile. Beatrice had not erased grief. She had composted it. The garden grew darker, richer blooms. Compost is the final mercy of attention. Nothing is wasted. The fight with your teenager, the rejected manuscript, the diagnosis, each can rot into humus. If you stop watering the story, this should not have happened, and start watering the story, what can grow here? A sculptor in Marrakesh once showed me a bowl carved from olive wood, warped by fire. The flames tried to destroy it, he said, but I listened to the shape the heat suggested. He turned the charred twist into a curve that cradled light. Attention is listening to the shape suffering suggests. As this chapter ends, step outside tonight, literally, if you can. Find one living thing, a tree, a blade of grass, the thinnest weed pushing through concrete. Give it 60 uninterrupted seconds. Notice texture, color, the way wind negotiates with leaf. If the mind wanders, gently return the water. 60 seconds is enough for the reticular bouncer to tag alive as VIP. Tomorrow you will notice 3 more living things without trying. The garden is expanding, one drop at a time. The monk on the cliff eventually filled his bowl with river water and carried it back across the desert. When he reached the first village, he poured it into a cracked clay pot by the well. Children watched, expecting a miracle. The water soaked into the dust and vanished. The monk smiled. Now the river is inside the village, he said. Your attention is that river. Pour it where you want the world to drink. The goldfish timer is ticking, but 8 seconds is forever if you aim it right. The garden is waiting, bowl in hand, for the next drop to decide what grows. Chapter 4. The Mirror of Belief. The moment you decide a thing is impossible, the universe nods and closes the door. The moment you decide it might be possible, the universe cracks the door and slips you a key. The difference between the two moments is not evidence, it is belief. Belief is the mirror you hold up to reality, and reality, polite guess that it is, adjusts its tide to match the reflection. Most of us spend our lives polishing a mirror that shows only what we already expect. Scratches, distortions, the same tired face. This chapter is about wiping the glass clean, then choosing what to etch into it next. In the hills of ancient Greece, a shepherd boy named Pheidippides once ran 26 miles to Athens to announce victory over the Persians. He delivered the message, collapsed, and died. For 2,000 years, the story was told as a cautionary tale. The human body has limits. Push too far, and you pay with your life. Then, in the late 20th century, a handful of eccentrics began running twice that distance for fun. They called it an ultra-marathon. Doctors warned of heart attacks, kidney failure, certain death. The runners kept going. Today, thousands finish 100-mile races through mountains, and the medical consensus has flipped. With training, the body adapts. The mirror of belief changed, and flesh followed the reflection. Your beliefs live in the basement of the mind, humming like a furnace you rarely inspect. Cognitive psychologists call them core schemas, silent rules written in childhood crayon. People leave. Mistakes are dangerous. I must be perfect to be loved. They feel as solid as the floor beneath your feet until you shine a flashlight and see the crayon marks. A woman named Clara grew up in a house where her father praised only A-plus report cards. By 35, she was a partner at a law firm, miserable and secretly shredding any brief that wasn't flawless. She believed her worth was a GPA. One rainy Tuesday, her mentor handed back a memo covered in red ink and said, "This is good enough to win, ship it." Clara stared at the marks, expecting shame, but felt a strange flutter, relief, almost hunger. She shipped the memo. The case settled in their favor. That night, she dug out her childhood report cards and noticed something. Every A-plus was followed by her father's silence, not praise. The rule had been a ghost. She framed the red-inked memo instead. The mirror cracked. Light poured through. Neuroscience maps the crack. Beliefs are encoded in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, a region that assigns value to outcomes. Feed it repeated evidence. I always get passed over, and it downgrades the emotional payoff of trying. Show it counter-evidence just once, vividly, and the valuation shifts. A single vivid exception is worth 1,000 lukewarm statistics. Clara's red-inked victory was vivid. The brain updated the schema overnight. She began shipping imperfect work, and within a year, her billable hours rose because she stopped rewriting commas at 2 a.m. The furnace hummed a new temperature. Long ago in India, a prince named Siddhartha sat beneath a Bodhi tree determined to see reality without the distortion of inherited belief. For years he had been told that suffering was inevitable, but the wheel of samsara turned forever. He watched his breath until the stories quieted, then watched ants carry a dead beetle, watched leaves fall, watched hunger rise and pass in his own belly. At dawn, a star winked out, and with it the belief that anything was permanent. He laughed, not from joy, but from the sheer likeness of an empty mirror. When he stood, the ground did not feel different, yet everything had changed. The man who walked away became the Buddha, but the moment that birthed him was simply the moment the mirror went blank. Blank is fertile. A blank mirror invites new etchings. Modern therapists use a technique called cognitive restructuring. Identify the belief, test it like a scientist, replace it if it fails. Sounds simple until you try. The belief fights back with every weapon evolution gave it. Fear, memory, the testimony of your own pulse. A salesman named Victor believed people don't buy from someone who stutters. He had stuttered since childhood, and every cold call felt like walking a tightrope over that sentence. His manager sent him to a workshop where the facilitator asked him to collect data. For 1 week, Victor was to call 50 prospects and track only one variable. Did the stutter predict the sale? He made the calls, palms sweating, expecting confirmation. The data said otherwise: 23 yeses, 27 nos, no correlation with fluency. On the plane home, he stared at the spreadsheet and felt the sentence dissolve like sugar in tea. He began recording his calls, listening not for stumbles, but for connection. Within 6 months, he led the region in closed deals. The Mirror now read, "People buy from someone who listens." Listening is the Polish. Beliefs harden in echo chambers, family dinners, news feeds, the monologue in your head. To soften them, invite contradiction. A chef in New Orleans named Delphine believed real gumbo takes 8 hours. Her grandmother's recipe demanded it, and Delphine guarded the pot like a priestess. Then a hurricane flooded her restaurant, and with no power she had to cook for 200 displaced neighbors on a camp stove. She stirred faster, tasted sooner, served in 90 minutes. The line went silent, then erupted in moans of pleasure. An elder who had eaten her grandmother's gumbo wiped his eyes and said, "Your grandma's smiling down. She knows love don't need a clock." Delphine wrote the new time on the chalkboard menu. Gumbo, however long it takes to feed who's hungry. The restaurant reopened to lines around the block. The Mirror had expanded to hold both tradition and improvisation. Expansion requires friction. The brain hates cognitive dissonance, the itch of holding two contradictory beliefs. It will twist reality to scratch the itch. In the 1950s, a cult predicted the world would end on December 21st. Members sold houses, quit jobs, gathered on a hill to be lifted by spaceships. Midnight came. No spaceships. A lesser group would have scattered in shame. Instead, the leader received a new message. Their faith had spared the planet. Membership doubled. The Mirror adjusted to save face. You do this on a smaller scale every time you excuse a failed diet with "I was stressed" or a broken promise with "I'm just not a morning person." The belief stays intact, reality bends. To outsmart the bend, borrow from science. Run experiments. Treat belief as hypothesis, not verdict. A software engineer named Aisha believed "I'm not a leader." She was brilliant at code, but froze in meetings. Her therapist suggested a 30-day experiment. Act as if the opposite were true, just to gather data. Aisha volunteered to run one stand-up, then one retro, then one client demo. She kept a lab notebook, heart rate, stumbles, feedback. By day 30, the notebook showed a pattern. The more she led, the calmer she felt. The calmer she felt, the clearer her ideas. On day 31, her boss offered her the team lead role. She accepted, still terrified, but the terror now had an expiration date. The Mirror read, "Leadership is a skill, not a gene." Genes, by the way, are not destiny. They are suggestions whispered to the Mirror. Epigenetics shows that environment flips genetic switches. A famous rat study separated identical twins at birth. One was raised by a nurturing mother who licked and groomed, the other by a stressed mother who ignored. The nurtured rat grew bold and calm. The neglected rat grew anxious and sickly. Same DNA, different beliefs about the world. In humans, the placebo effect is epigenetics in real time. Tell patients a sugar pill will ease pain and their brains release endorphins. Tell them it will sharpen memory and prefrontal cortex blood flow increases. The body believes the Mirror and rewrites chemistry to match. The most potent placebo is self-talk. A janitor named Luis cleaned an elementary school for 20 years, believing "I'm just the cleaner." Children ran past him. Teachers nodded politely. Then a new principal asked every staff member to share one wish for the kids. Luis hesitated, then said, "I wish they knew somebody cares if their boots are wet." The principal printed his words on the staff bulletin. "Mr. Luis cares if your boots are wet." Children began seeking him out, showing drawings, asking him to tie shoes, confessing fears. Louis started carrying extra socks in his cart. By spring, the kindergarten teacher reported fewer tears at drop-off. Louis stood taller, his mop strokes surer. The mirror now read, "I am the keeper of small hearts." His salary never changed, but his life expanded to fill the new reflection. Expansion leaves fingerprints. Beliefs shape posture, vocabulary, the micro choices that become destiny. A study at Harvard had hotel guests wear a pedometer for a week, then told half of them their cleaning work met exercise guidelines. The informed group's posture improved, waistlines shrank without extra effort. The mirror said, "Athlete," the body complied. "You can run the experiment on yourself. For one day, walk as if you believe I am capable. Notice shoulders, stride, eye contact. For one day, speak as if you believe my voice matters. Notice word choice, volume, the way listeners lean in. The body is eavesdropping on the mirror. Eavesdropping works both ways. Others reflect your beliefs back to you. A teacher named Mr. Chen believed teenagers are lazy. His students slouched, late with homework, eyes on phones. Frustrated, he attended a workshop and decided to test the opposite. Teenagers are capable when trusted. He began assigning projects with no rubric, only the question, "What do you care enough to research for a month?" One boy chose the physics of skateboarding, built a ramp in the courtyard, and taught classmates to measure velocity. Another girl mapped food deserts in their zip code and organized a farmer's market. Test scores rose, detention referrals fell. Mr. Chen's new mirror read, "I grow what I expect." The teenagers had simply stepped into the reflection he offered. Offering is contagious. In the 1980s, a researcher named Rosenthal gave teachers fake IQ scores, showing certain students were late bloomers. The teachers, believing the scores, gave those students more attention, harder questions, warmer smiles. By year's end, the bloomers had gained an average of 12 IQ points for real. The mirror of expectation became a self-fulfilling prophecy. You are someone's teacher, parent, friend, barista. The belief you beam lands in their mirror and begins to etch. Etching takes time. Neural pathways strengthen with myelin, a fatty sheath that speeds signals. Myelin grows through repetition, not revelation. One vivid exception cracks the mirror. Daily repetition rebuilds it stronger. A pianist doesn't master Chopin in an epiphany. She plays the passage 1,000 times until the fingers believe the music. Rewrite belief the same way. A recovering perfectionist named Sophia replaced "good enough is failure" with "progress is perfect." She wrote the new sentence on a sticky note, placed it on her bathroom mirror, and read it aloud while brushing teeth. 730 repetitions in 2 years. She tracked progress in a jar. Every finished draft, every sent email, every imperfect cake that still tasted sweet. When the jar overflowed, she poured the slips into a bowl and reread them on her birthday. The mirror now showed a mosaic, not a monolith. Mosaics allow paradox. The Buddha's empty mirror did not stay blank. It filled with compassion. Contradictory beliefs can coexist if held lightly. I am enough and I am becoming are not enemies. They are dance partners. A CEO named Julian believed both. I must drive results and I must care for my people. For years, the beliefs warred, leaving him exhausted. Then he visited a monastery where monks rang a bell every hour to pause and breathe. He installed a soft chime in the office. Every hour, work stopped for 90 seconds of silence. Employees rolled eyes at first, then began sharing what the silence revealed. Ideas, gratitudes, confessions of burnout. Productivity rose, so did retention. The mirror held both rigor and rest, etched side by side. Side-by-side etchings create depth. Depth is where miracles live. In 1960, a surgeon named Barnard believed a human heart could be transplanted. The medical establishment laughed, The mirror said, impossible. He practiced on dogs, failed 50 times, studied each failure like scripture. On December 3rd, 1967, he held Denise Darville's dying heart in one hand and Louis Washkansky's failing one in the other. The mirror flickered. This might work. It did for 18 days, long enough to prove the reflection could change. Today, thousands live with borrowed hearts. Barnard's belief didn't create the technology, it created the permission. Permission is the quiet click when the door opens. Children ask for it instinctively. A 4-year-old believes she can fly if she flaps hard enough until adults laugh. The mirror fogs with can't. Protect the child's mirror long enough and she becomes an astronaut. A study of eminent creators found one common thread, at least one adult who believed in them unqualifiedly. The adult didn't need expertise. They needed an unflinching mirror. Be that adult for yourself. When the inner voice says you're too old, answer watch me. When it says you'll look foolish, answer maybe, and maybe that's the point. Foolishness is fertile. In the court of Emperor Frederick II, a jester named Kunz believed the emperor's melancholy could be cured by laughter. Protocol forbade direct mockery, so Kunz trained a pig to dance. He presented the pig at banquet, dressed in velvet, twirling to lute music. The emperor stared, then guffawed, a sound not heard in years. The court followed. The mirror cracked. Joy rushed in. Kunz was promoted to Minister of Mirth. Centuries later, laughter yoga clubs prescribe the same medicine. Fake a chuckle until the body believes it, then watches depression retreat. The pig is optional. Yeah. Optional is the key. Beliefs are clothes, not skin. Try them on, twirl, discard what pinches. A traveler in Morocco once entered a souk and saw a merchant selling mirrors of every size. He asked the merchant which was truest. The merchant held up a tiny one, no larger than a coin. This one, he said, because it forces you to stand close. Proximity reveals detail. Stand close to your beliefs. Ask, where did you come from? Whose voice is this? What would happen if I laid you down for a day? A widow named Margaret believed, I can't live without him. She wore the belief like black lace for a year. On the anniversary of his death, she attended a grief circle and heard a man say, I laid the belief down for 1 hour and breathed. Margaret tried it. She set a timer, placed her wedding ring in a bowl, and walked to the garden. For 60 minutes, she believed only, I am here. She noticed the smell of rosemary, the weight of her own feet, the way grief still sat in her chest, but no longer filled the sky. When the timer rang, she slipped the ring back on, but the belief had shrunk to fit beside others. The mirror had room for both love and life. Room is the final gift. A crowded mirror distorts. A spacious one reflects galaxies. Meditation teacher Jack Cornfield tells of a student who complained that mindfulness made her beliefs feel shaky. Good, he said. Shaky means they're learning to dance. Dance requires space between notes. Create it nightly. Before sleep, review one belief that caused pain today. Hold it like a snow globe. Watch the glitter settle, then set it on a shelf labeled maybe. Morning will bring fresh light. Over months the shelf fills with maybes, and the mirror widens to hold uncertainty, the only belief that never lies. As we close this chapter, take one belief into the bathroom tonight. Look your reflection in the eye and speak it aloud. Then speak its opposite. Notice which one makes your shoulders rise, which makes your breath catch. Do not force a winner, simply record the bodily vote. Tomorrow, act as if the winner is true for one small decision. Order the salad, make the call, say the apology. The body will report back. The mirror is listening. It has been waiting for your voice to etch something new. The key is already in your hand. The door was never locked. Turn it gently. The reflection is ready to change clothes. Chapter 5. The Alchemy of Emotion. The first time I saw someone turn lead into gold, I was 8 years old and standing in my grandmother's kitchen. She was slicing onions for soup, tears streaming down her cheeks. when the phone rang. It was my father calling from the hospital to say my mother had been in a car accident. My grandmother's knife froze mid-air, onion juice stinging the cut on her thumb. For 3 heartbeats, the room held its breath. Then she set the knife down, wiped her hands on her apron, and began to hum an old Italian lullaby. The tune was soft, almost silly, but it wrapped around the terror like bread around cheese. She kept humming while she packed a bag with my mother's favorite sweater, while she drove us through rain-slick streets, while she sat in the waiting room, holding my hand so tightly I still remember the shape of her bones. My mother had a broken arm and a concussion, nothing more. Years later, I asked my grandmother why she hummed instead of cried. She shrugged and said, "Tears were already there from the onions. I gave them a job." That was my first glimpse of emotional alchemy, the art of taking the raw ore of feeling, hot, heavy, often ugly, and transmuting it into something that serves life. Emotions are not decorations on the personality. They are chemical messengers, evolutionary signals, and when handled with intention, the most potent fuel in the human engine. The brain does not file them in a drawer labeled "deal with later." It floods the body with cortisol or oxytocin, adrenaline or serotonin, and waits to see what you build with the delivery. Most of us build prisons or bonfires. The alchemist builds bridges. Long before anyone measured neuropeptides, a samurai named Takuan was summoned to the shogun's court to teach swordsmanship. The shogun, a man whose temper could empty a room faster than a drawn blade, watched Takuan spar and noticed the monk never seemed angry, never afraid. After the demonstration, the shogun demanded the secret. Takuan asked for a cup of tea. When it arrived steaming, he held it at eye level and said, "This tea is hot." The shogun nodded. Takuan tilted the cup and let a single drop fall onto the tatami. "Now the tea is spilled," he said. "Anger is like this tea. It arrives hot. You can drink it, spill it, or set it down and let it cool. The choice is yours, but the tea is already poured." The shogun stared at the darkening spot on the mat, then laughed for the first time in months. He kept Takuan at court for a year, not for sword lessons, but for tea. Your limbic system is the shogun's court, and emotions are the tea. They arrive uninvited, scalding or sweet, and the prefrontal cortex is the hand deciding what happens next. Neuroimaging shows that naming an emotion, "I feel anger," reduces amygdala activation within 90 seconds, the neurological equivalent of setting the cup down. But naming is only the first step. Alchemy requires transformation, not just translation. The anger must become something else, a boundary repair, a boundary celebration. The sadness must become depth, the fear must become caution or courage, the joy must become generosity, or the whole garden drinks. Firefighter named Carla once pulled a child from a burning apartment. The boy lived, but the image of his soot-streaked face haunted her sleep. Every alarm bell after that triggered a cascade, heart racing, palms sweating, the smell of smoke that wasn't there. The department psychologist called it PTSD and prescribed exposure therapy. Carla tried, but the flashbacks grew teeth. One night, exhausted, she sat at her kitchen table and drew the boy's face from memory, charcoal on butcher paper, every eyelash exact. When she finished, she cried for the first time since the fire. Then she turned the page and drew him again, this time smiling, holding a fire truck. She taped both drawings above her bunk at the station. New recruits asked about them. Carla told the story, voice steady, and within a month, the nightmares thinned. Within a year, she was training rookies in trauma response. The lead of terror had become the gold of mentorship. She still smells smoke sometimes, but now it smells like purpose. Science calls Carla's drawings emotional reconsolidation. When a memory is reactivated by a trigger, a smell, a sound, the brain briefly returns it to a malleable state, like clay softened by water. Slip in a new element, compassion, humor, meaning, and the memory hardens around the addition. Holocaust survivors who later built families report lower cortisol levels when recalling camp memories than survivors who remained isolated. The brain rewrote the file. I endured became I endured and created life. The alchemy is not denial, it is integration. Integration requires a crucible. The crucible is the body. Emotions live in the shoulders, the gut, the jaw, not just the skull. A dancer in Havana taught me this. Her name was Marisol, and she moved like water, remembering it could fly. I asked how she stayed graceful under the weight of a city crumbling around her. She took my hand and placed it on her solar plexus. Feel, she said. I felt heat, a tremor, the drum of her heart. This is where the storm lives. If I push it away, it grows fists. If I dance it, it becomes rhythm. That night the power went out mid-rehearsal. Instead of stopping, the company lit candles and kept moving, shadows leaping across cracked plaster. Marisol spun until the storm inside her matched the storm outside, then slowed into stillness. When the lights flickered back, the audience, neighbors who had wandered in for shelter, stood silent, then applauded with tears. The crucible had melted fear into beauty. Beauty is one of the alchemist's favorite alloys. Joy, left to itself, evaporates. Joy shared becomes gratitude. Gratitude shared becomes connection. Connection shared becomes culture. A study at the University of North Carolina had strangers pair up and recount a positive event. One partner listened attentively, the other scrolled their phone. The attentive pairs showed synchronized heart rates and increased vagal tone, a marker of emotional resilience. The distracted pairs left with flat affect. The crucible needs two bodies to complete the circuit. Two bodies can also short-circuit. A couple named Leo and Amaya came to see me after 20 years of marriage that had calcified into silence. Leo believed anger was dangerous. Amaya believed sadness was weakness. Their emotions arrived, found no crucible, and hardened into resentment. I asked them to sit facing each other and take turns naming one feeling in the moment, no story attached. Leo started. Irritation, Amaya. Hurt, Leo. Guilt, Amaya. Fear. They went back and forth for 10 minutes, voices soft, eyes locked. When the timer rang, Leo reached for Amaya's hand without thinking. She let him. The crucible had been missing a lid. Simple presence screwed it on. They left holding hands, a gesture absent for years. 6 months later, they sent a photo from a salsa class, laughing mid-spin. The lead of silence had become the gold of play. Play is the alchemist's playground. Children transmute fear into tag, sadness into hide and seek, boredom into imaginary kingdoms. Adults forget the recipe. A software company in Stockholm remembered. Facing burnout, they installed a slide between floors, a treehouse meeting room, foosball in the lobby. Engineers rolled eyes. Productivity would tank. Instead, sick days dropped 40%. Patents filed doubled. The crucible of play melted stress into dopamine, dopamine into focus, focus into innovation. One developer told me he solved a bug that had stumped him for weeks while sliding headfirst into a ball pit. The body remembered childhood alchemy before the mind caught up. The mind catches up through metaphor. Emotions are abstract until clothed in image. A therapist in Cape Town works with rape survivors by asking them to sculpt their feelings in clay. One woman shaped rage into a volcano, grief into a cracked bowl, shame into a locked box. Week after week she returned, adding lava flows of orange, patching the bowl with gold leaf, picking the lock with a tiny key. When the sculpture was done, she placed it on the windowsill where sunrise lit the gold cracks. Kintsugi, she said, naming the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. I'm not fixed, I'm precious where I broke. The metaphor became the crucible, the clay became the bridge. Bridges carry weight, unprocessed emotion collapses them. A bridge inspector named Diego discovered this when a routine check revealed hairline fractures in a span that carried 10,000 cars daily. The city wanted a quick patch. Diego insisted on understanding the cause. He traced the cracks to vibrations from heavy trucks during rush hour, amplified by a design flaw no one had noticed for 30 years. Shutting the bridge for repairs cost millions and rerouted lives, but the alternative was catastrophe. Emotions are infrastructure. Ignore the hairline fracture of chronic anxiety, and one day the span gives way in a panic attack, a blown deal, a snapped relationship. Diego's repair took 6 months. The bridge emerged stronger, rated for heavier loads. Emotional repair follows the same arc. Inspect, understand, reinforce. Reinforcement begins with breath. The vagus nerve, a wandering highway from brain to gut, regulates the parasympathetic response. Slow, deep breathing massages it like a cat on a lap. Navy SEALs use box breathing. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4, to transmute adrenaline into alertness. A midwife in rural Guatemala taught it to mothers in labor. Instead of screaming through contractions, they boxed the pain into rhythm. Cesarean rates dropped. Mothers reported feeling in the pain, but not of it. The crucible was the rib cage, the gold was agency. Vinci is the alchemist's signature. Victims feel emotion as something done to them. Alchemists feel it as raw material. A prisoner named Malik spent 14 years in solitary for a crime he didn't commit. The walls pressed in, rage simmered, hope curdled. He began noticing the exact shade of gray on the floor: pigeon, storm, ash. He assigned each shade a memory: pigeon for his daughter's laugh, storm for the night he was arrested, ash for the moment he forgave the system. When DNA evidence freed him, he walked out carrying nothing but those shades. He founded a non-profit painting prison cells in colors chosen by inmates. Recidivism in painted pods fell 27%. The lead of confinement became the gold of choice. Choice lives in the pause. Between stimulus and response lies a gap no wider than a heartbeat, yet vast enough to change destiny. Neuroscientist Viktor Frankl survived Nazi camps by living in that gap. When guards beat him, he paused and chose to imagine his wife's smile. The smile was memory, but the choice was alchemy. He later wrote, "The last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance." The crucible was a concentration camp. The gold was meaning. Meaning is portable. A hospice nurse named Ruth carries it in her pocket like a smooth stone. She asks dying patients one question: what gave your life meaning? Answers vary: a child's birth, a perfect pie, the way light hit the barn at dusk. But the asking transmutes fear into legacy. One man, a former mechanic, hadn't spoken in days. Ruth asked. He whispered, "Teaching my son to fix the truck." Ruth found the son, brought him to the bedside with a carburetor. Father and son rebuilt it together, hands trembling, grease under nails. The man died 3 hours later, smiling. The crucible was a hospital room. The gold was continuity. Continuity threads generations. A grandmother in Oaxaca teaches her granddaughters to weave emotions into textiles. Joy is yellow, grief is indigo, anger is crimson. When a girl feels rage at a bullying cousin, she is sent to the loom with red thread. The act of shuttling crimson through warp slows the pulse, focuses the mind. By the time the strip is done, the rage has become pattern. The textile hangs in the courtyard, catching sun, reminding everyone that anger passed through and left beauty. The crucible is the loom, the gold is memory made visible. Visibility prevents hoarding. Unexpressed emotion festers. A cardiac surgeon named Patel noticed that patients who cried before open-heart surgery had fewer complications than stoic ones. Tears flush cortisol. Repression raises blood pressure. He began inviting preoperative tears, With a simple ritual, patients hold a photo of someone they love while a nurse reads a poem. The recovery ward nicknamed it the weep before the cut. Mortality rates dipped. The crucible was vulnerability. The gold was survival. Survival is not the goal. Thriving is. Joy, like any emotion, can be alchemized upward. A festival in Bhutan measures gross national happiness with surveys that ask, "How often did you laugh yesterday?" Low scores trigger policy. More green spaces, later school starts. Laughter releases endorphins, lowers inflammation, lengthens telomeres. A clown doctor program in Brazilian pediatric wards cut pain medication by 30%. The crucible was a red nose. The gold was healing. Healing circles back to the body. A yoga teacher in Detroit works with veterans using trauma-sensitive poses. Downward dog becomes a crucible for rage, hips high, fists pounding mat. Child's pose becomes a crucible for grief, forehead to earth, tears watering the soil. One Marine, silent for months, began sobbing in Savasana. The room held space. When he sat up, he said, "I left Fallujah on that mat." The crucible was gravity, the gold was homecoming. Homecoming requires witnesses. A South African Truth Commission invited perpetrators and survivors to speak in the same room. A white officer confessed to torturing a black activist's son. The mother listened, then stood and sang a Xhosa lullaby her child loved. The officer wept. Decades later, he funds the son's scholarship. The crucible was testimony. The gold was reconciliation. Reconciliation begins inside. A meditation app study found that 8 weeks of loving-kindness practice, wishing well to self, loved one, neutral person, difficult person, shrank the amygdala and thickened the posterior cingulate, empathy seat. Participants reported less road rage, more spontaneous help. The crucible was a smartphone. The gold was civilization. Civilization is fragile. One unalchemized emotion can topple it. A single tweet of rage can spark a riot. A single act of kindness can calm a crowd. In 2020, a Minneapolis mural of George Floyd became a crucible. People left flowers, candles, notes. Grief transmuted into art, art into vigil, vigil into movement. The wall held the heat until it cooled into policy. The lead was murder, the gold was memory that demands change. Change is the alchemist's proof. Track it nightly. One emotion, one transmutation. Anger letter never sent. Sadness playlist that made you dance. Fear cold shower that woke courage. Over months, the journal becomes a periodic table of your personal elements. A social worker named June filled 3 volumes. She reread them on her 50th birthday and realized the dominant element was curiosity. Every entry ended with a question. She quit her job, enrolled in medical school, became a psychiatrist, specializing in adolescent suicide prevention. The crucible was paper. The gold was lives saved. Lives saved begin with one. A suicidal teenager named Jonah texted a crisis line at 3 a.m. The responder, trained in alchemy, says, "What does the pain weigh tonight?" Jonah typed, "A planet." The responder, "Can you set the planet down for 1 minute and tell me the color of your socks?" Jonah looked gray. The conversation continued, planet shrinking to continent, continent to pebble. By dawn, Jonah was laughing at the absurdity of sock color, saving a life. He checked into treatment. 2 years later, he volunteers for the same line. The crucible was a screen. The gold was tomorrow. Tomorrow is built one crucible at a time. My grandmother's lullaby became my mother's habit, became my habit, became the way I soothe my own child after nightmares. The onion tears still fall, but now they water basil on the windowsill. The circle is complete. The lead was fear. The gold is a song that outlives us. As this chapter ends, step into the crucible tonight. Choose one emotion that visited today, no matter how small. Name it, feel it in the body, then ask, what wants to be born from you? Do not force an answer. Move, draw, sing, walk, cook, cry. Let the heat do its work. Tomorrow, notice what grew in the cool dash. The tea is poured. The choice is yours. The garden is waiting for its next bridge, and the gold is already inside the lid. Chapter 6. The Symphony of Habit. The first sound you hear every morning is not the alarm clock. It is the quiet click of 1,000 tiny doors opening inside your brain, each one a habit sliding into place like a violinist taking her chair before the orchestra begins. By the time your eyes focus on the ceiling, the conductor, your basal ganglia, has already cued the percussion of heartbeat, the woodwinds of breath, the brass of hunger. You do not decide to swallow, to shift weight, and to register light. The symphony plays itself. This chapter is about slipping backstage, picking up the baton, and rewriting the score one measure at a time. Habits are not chains, they are chords. Change the chord and the entire song lifts. In the misty valleys of ancient Japan, a monk named Enin kept a diary on silk scraps. Every evening he recorded the same 3 lines. I woke, I walked, I slept. For 30 years, the entries never varied. Travelers mocked the monotony until one winter night a blizzard trapped a merchant in the monastery. The merchant watched Enin rise at the usual bell, sweep snow from the path with the same rhythmic strokes, boil the same thin gruel, chant the same sutra. When the storm cleared, the merchant asked, "How do you not go mad with repetition?" Enin smiled and handed him the newest silk scrap. It read, I woke, I walked with the merchant, I slept. The merchant kept the scrap for life, and when he later built a trading empire, he credited the lesson. The habit was the container. What filled it could change the world. Your basal ganglia is Enin's monastery, running the container on autopilot, so the prefrontal cortex, the conscious composer, can rest. Neuroimaging shows that once a behavior is habitual, the brain shifts activity from the effortful dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to the efficient basal ganglia, dropping energy use by up to 90%. This is why brushing teeth feels effortless, but learning to floss takes willpower. The monastery doors are greased. New monks must knock loudly. The salesman named Roberto learned the knock. He sold insurance door to door in Sao Paulo, and every morning he stared at his call list with dread. The habit was procrastination, coffee, social media, organizing desk, then calls at 11 a.m. when prospects were busiest. His closing rate hovered at 8%. His manager suggested a keystone habit experiment. Move the first call to 8:05 a.m., no exceptions. Roberto groaned but tried. The first week, he white-knuckled it, phone trembling. By week 3, the dread had thinned. By month 2, he was making 30 calls. Before 10 a.m. closing rate hit 22%. The monastery had accepted a new monk, the 8:05 call. The rest of the score rearranged itself around the new downbeat. Keystone habits are the conductor's cue. Change one, and the orchestra follows. A study at Stanford gave overweight participants one task: record everything they ate. No diet, no exercise, just write it down. 6 months later, the group had lost an average of 14 pounds, without instruction. The habit of tracking spilled into smaller portions, more vegetables, evening walks. The brain loves coherence. Tweak one note, and harmony seeks to realign. Harmony is built on cue, routine, reward, the 3 movements of every habit symphony. Psychologist B.J. Fogg mapped them like sheet music. The cue is the bell, time, place, emotion, preceding action, person. The routine is the melody, the behavior itself. The reward is the final chord, dopamine, relief, pride. Miss any movement and the piece collapses. A smoker lights up after coffee. Cue, inhales, routine, feels calm, reward. To rewrite, keep the cue and reward, swap the melody. A recovering smoker I coached kept the coffee and the calm, but inserted a 2-minute balcony walk. Within weeks, the cigarette craving faded. The balcony became the new violin solo. Soloists need rehearsal. The brain myelinates pathways through repetition, not intention. A London bus driver study found that after 10,000 miles, drivers could navigate new routes with half the cognitive load of novices. Myelin is the orchestra's muscle memory. Build it with tiny encores. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, advises the 2-minute rule. Scale any new habit to its smallest viable form. Want to meditate? Sit for 2 minutes. Want to read? Open a book for 2 minutes. The monastery doors swing wide for small monks. Grandeur comes later. Grandeur hides in environment. A violin left in its case gathers dust. One on a stand begs to be played. A nurse named Priya wanted to drink more water but forgot amid 12-hour shifts. She placed a bright blue bottle on every station desk, queue in plain sight. Hydration tripled. A coder named Liam wanted to code daily but opened Reddit instead. He moved the Reddit icon to a folder 3 clicks deep and pinned his editor to the dock. Lines of code flowed. The monastery is architecture. Design the hallways and the monks walk themselves. Hallways include people. Social habits are contagious. Christakis and Fowler's Framingham study tracked 12,000 people for 30 years and found obesity spreads through 3 degrees of separation. If your friend's friend gains weight, your odds rise 20%. The same holds for happiness, smoking cessation, voting. Your orchestra sits among other orchestras. Harmonies resonate. A teacher in rural Kenya wanted her students to read more. She created a book buddy system. Pairs read aloud to each other for 10 minutes daily. Within a semester, library checkouts quadrupled, and the habit spread to parents eavesdropping outside classrooms. The cue was the bell, the reward was laughter shared. Laughter is a reward the brain craves. Dopamine binds to D2 receptors in the nucleus accumbens, lighting up like a crescendo. Stack habits onto existing dopamine hits. A mother named Sophia wanted to exercise but crashed after putting kids to bed. She piggybacked a habit after the final bedtime story, cue. She did 10 squats while brushing teeth, routine. Then enjoyed a square of dark chocolate, reward. 6 months later, she was doing full workouts. The chocolate became optional. The monastery loves a good remix. Remixes falter without identity. Recall the echo chamber from earlier. I am a runner sustains jogging through rain. I am trying to run collapses at the first puddle. A smoker who says, I'm quitting, fights every cigarette. One who says, I'm a non-smoker, feels cognitive dissonance lighting up and puts it out. Identity is the sheet music the orchestra reads first. A lawyer named Marcus wanted to write a novel, but believed, I'm not creative. He changed the belief to, I'm a person who finishes what I start, then attached a habit. After Sunday dinner, cue, write 200 words, routine, post the count in a family group chat, reward. The novel reached 80,000 words in 18 months. The monastery had a new monk, the finisher. Finishers track progress. Visual cues are dopamine fertilizer. A jar of marbles, a chain on the calendar, a streak in an app, each marks the beat. Jerry Seinfeld famously used a red X on a wall calendar for every day he wrote jokes. Don't break the chain, he told a young comic. The chain becomes the cue. The X becomes the reward. A gardener named May used paper clips. One clip moved from to-do jar to done jar for every bed weeded. By summer's end, the done jar overflowed, and her roses won the county fair. The monastery loves visible tempo. Tempo accelerates with friction removal. Stanford's B.J. Fogg, again. Make the habit so easy it's harder to skip. A CEO wanted to delegate more but defaulted to doing everything himself. He created a delegation menu on his phone home screen, 3 tasks he could assign in under 30 seconds. Frictionless delegation tripled. A student wanted to study but opened Netflix. He unplugging the TV and stored the remote in a locked box with a timer. Study sessions doubled. The monastery is minimalist. Clutter muffles the music. Muffles can be emotional. Shame is the loudest cymbal crash. Miss a day, and the inner critic screams, failure. The orchestra freezes. Compassionate recovery is the mute pedal. A dieter named Jonah binged on pizza after a stressful meeting. Old habit, spiral into I'm hopeless. Skip the gym for a week. New habit, label the binge. Stress eating. Schedule a gentle walk the next morning. Text a friend back on track. The orchestra resumed without missing a movement. Compassion myelinates forgiveness. Shame erodes it. Erosion carves canyons. Old habits linger in the basal ganglia like ghost melodies. A recovering alcoholic walks past a bar, queue, and feels the pull, craving. The monastery doors remember urge surfing, developed by mindfulness researcher Alan Marlett, treats the craving like a wave. Notice it rise, peak, crash. Brain scans show that surfing the urge for 90 seconds reduces nucleus accumbens activity by 40%. The wave passes, the monastery plays on. Playing on requires substitution, not elimination. Nature abhors a vacuum. A nail biter replaced the habit with a stress ball. A procrastinator replaced scrolling with a 1-minute timer to start the task. An insomniac replaced phone in bed with audiobook on timer. The cue and reward stay, the melody swaps. A pianist doesn't remove keys, she learns new scales. Scales build virtuosity, habit stacking chains melodies. After morning coffee, existing habit, drink a glass of water, new habit. After water, 2 minutes of stretching. After stretching, review top priority. Charles Duhigg calls this a keystone chain. One CEO stacked a morning routine so tight that by 7:30 a.m., he had hydrated, moved, planned, and meditated. 4 habits, 1 flow. The monastery became a cathedral. A cathedral's echo, public commitment, amplifies. A writer named Elena posted daily word counts on Twitter. Followers cheered. The streak became identity. She finished her novel in 11 months. A runner joined a Strava club. Virtual high fives replaced solitary miles. Commitment devices bind future self to present intention. Odysseus tied himself to the mast. Modern versions include apps that donate to charity if you miss the gym, or public bets with friends. The monastery loves an audience. Audiences include future self. A technique called temptation bundling pairs a want with a should, audiobooks only while folding laundry. Favorite show only on the treadmill, the want funds the should. A student bundled Instagram with flashcards, 1 reel per 10 terms memorized. Grades rose, doom scrolling dropped. The monastery is clever with bribes. Bribes work because dopamine anticipates. The brain releases more for expected rewards than surprises. A rat pressing a lever for predictable pellets learns faster than one with random pellets. Habit apps gamify this. Streaks, badges, levels. A language learner hit 365-day Duolingo streak and received a virtual trophy. The trophy was pixels, but the dopamine was real. The monastery loves a finale. Finales prevent plateau. Habit researcher Wendy Wood notes that after 90 days, automaticity peaks, progress feels invisible. Introduce variation, new routes for runners, new recipes for cooks, new genres for readers. The monastery thrives on improv. Improv invites failure. Failure is the jazz solo. A chef burns the souffle, tastes the char, adjusts the oven next time. Thomas Edison's 1,000 light bulb failures were 1,000 rehearsals. Habit failure is data. A meditator misses a week, notices irritability, returns gentler. The monastery forgives detours. Detours reveal tempo preferences. Morning people stack habits at dawn, night owls at dusk. Introverts bundle solitary habits. Extroverts social ones track energy, not morality. A night shift nurse meditated at 3 a.m. when the ward quieted. Her days off sync to the same circadian cue. The monastery is personal. Personalization scales to teams. A startup replaced Monday status meetings with a shared Notion board updated asynchronously. Habit, Open board after coffee, add one bullet, read two others. Meetings shrank from 90 minutes to 0. Alignment rose. The monastery became a hive. Hives collapse without Sabbath. 1 day in 7, let the orchestra rest. Jewish tradition, blue zones, elite athletes, all build in recovery. A writer wrote 1,000 words daily for 6 days, then took Sunday off. Output averaged higher than daily grinders, rest rewires myelin thicker. The monastery sings louder after silence. Silence reveals the score. Every 90 days review the symphony. List current habits, rate energy given versus received. Retire one, adopt one. A teacher culled grading emails after 8 p.m., added evening walks with her dog. Sleep improved. Essays still graded. The monastery evolves. Evolution is lifelong. Neuroplasticity persists into old age. A 92-year-old in Okinawa learned the smartphone photography, posting daily flower shots. Her grandchildren commented, loneliness faded, the monastery doors never close. Main. Closing this chapter, conduct a one-day experiment. Choose one habit to install. 2 minutes, frictionless, stacked onto an existing cue. Example, after bathroom light switch, cue, do 3 deep breaths, routine. Smile at mirror, reward. Track it visibly. Paperclip, calendar X, phone note. Tomorrow notice the echo. The orchestra is listening. One new chord, and the entire symphony begins to shift. The baton is in your hand. The downbeat is now. Chapter 7. The Compass of Intention. The night before the Battle of Thermopylae, King Leonidas walked the narrow pass alone, boots crunching on shale, stars sharp as spear points above him. 300 Spartans slept behind him, and across the plain a Persian army of hundreds of thousands stirred like a waking dragon. Leonidas carried no map, no orders from distant kings, only a single intention burning in his chest: to hold the pass until the Greek cities could unite. When dawn came, he drew a line in the dirt with his spear and told his men, "Here we stand." They stood for 3 days. They lost the battle, but won the war, because the intention had already traveled ahead of them, lighting signal fires on every hill from Thermopylae to Athens. Intention is the compass that points before the foot moves, the silent arrow that finds the target while the bow is still unstrung. Your prefrontal cortex is Leonidas, scanning the horizon of possibility and choosing one line in the dirt. Neuroscientists call this executive function, but the ancients called it will, and both agree. Intention is the moment the future leans in to listen. Without it, the day is a Persian army of distractions, each soldier louder than the last. With it, even a single step carves a path. The compass does not guarantee arrival. It guarantees direction, and direction, held long enough, becomes destiny. In the bamboo groves of medieval China, a calligrapher named Zhang Shu practiced one stroke for 40 years. He began each dawn with a bowl of ink, a strip of rice paper, and the intention: let the brush breathe. Guests watched him fail thousands of times. Blots, tears, ink that ran like blood. One spring morning, a storm cracked the sky, and Zhang lifted the brush with the same intention. The stroke that emerged was a single black wave, alive, curling like smoke, crashing like thunder. Courtiers gasped. The emperor hung the scroll in the palace and declared it a national treasure. Zhang bowed and said, "The wave was always in the ink. I only intended long enough for it to find the paper." The compass had pointed at breath. The storm merely delivered the wind. Your intentions live in the same ink, words, images, feelings you dip the brush into every morning. Most of us write "get through the day" in faint gray. The paper accepts it, and the day arrives gray. Rewrite in bold, "let this day serve growth." The paper trembles. A study at Dominican University tracked 267 participants with goals. Those who wrote the goal, shared it with a friend, and sent weekly progress updates achieved 76% success. those who only thought the goal achieved 43%. The compass needs ink, witness, and rhythm to stay true north. Rhythm begins with clarity. Vague intention is a compass spinning in fog. A marketing director named Lila wanted more balance. She woke, frazzled, worked late, scrolled numb. I asked her to finish the sentence. Balance would feel like. She closed her eyes and said, leaving the office by 6, eating with my daughter, reading 10 pages before bed. We turned the feeling into a single line, home by 6, table by 7, book by 9. She wrote it on a card, taped it to her monitor. The first week she missed twice, the second week once. By month 3 the card was unnecessary. The rhythm had magnetized her day. The compass had a North Star. North Stars are personal. A Bedouin guide named Salim navigates the empty quarter with no GPS, only intention. Follow the wind that smells of my mother's tent. He teaches apprentices to notice the scent of cardamom on a breeze, the angle of dunes at dusk, the silence that means water nearby. Western explorers with satellite maps get lost. Salim arrives within the hour. The compass is not the tool, it is the relationship between traveler and desert. Your North Star is the feeling you want to inhabit, not the metric you want to hit. A writer chasing publish a bestseller burns out. One chasing feel the joy of words dancing, writes at dawn for decades and wakes to find the bestseller on the nightstand. Finding the feeling requires excavation. Beneath every intention lies a why that hums like a tuning fork. Simon Sinek's golden circle. Why, how, what? Most live in the outer ring. Do more, have more. Intention lives in the core. Be more. A nurse named Diego burned out checking boxes, vitals, meds, charts. I asked, why did you choose nursing? He remembered his abuela's hand cooling his fever with a wet cloth when he was 5. The why was cool the fever. He rewrote his intention, let every patient feel one moment of cool cloth. He began pausing at each bed to adjust a pillow, offer water, meet eyes, burnout lifted, patient satisfaction scores soared. The compass pointed at Abuela's hand. The hospital became the desert. Deserts test the compass. Obstacles are not detours. They are the terrain that proves the needle true. A violinist named Hannah practiced for the Juilliard audition with the intention, play as if the music already loves me. Nerves sabotaged her. Fingers froze mid-arpeggio. Her teacher said, intention is not armor, it is invitation. Hannah rewrote, invite the music to play me. She practiced with eyes closed, imagining the violin as a lover leaning in. Audition day, the panel saw a girl who disappeared into sound. She won the scholarship. The compass had invited the storm to dance. Dancing with storms requires micro-intentions. The day is a marathon. Intention is a series of sprints. A single mother named Rosa woke to chaos. Kids, traffic, bills. She set a macro-intention. Be the calm my children mirror. Then she broke it into micro moments. Breathe before opening the car door. Smile before answering the phone. Pause before saying no. Each pause was a compass reset. By evening the house hummed softer. The children began pausing too. The needle had taught the tribe. Tribes amplify intention. A rowing crew rows as one when the coxswain calls the intention together on 3. Hearts sink, oars bite water, the boat flies. A tech team I coached was fracturing under deadlines. We gathered in a circle and each spoke one intention for the sprint, ship code that delights. Support my teammates' idea. Celebrate small wins. We wrote them on a whiteboard in the center of the room. Bugs dropped 40%. Laughter rose. The compass had become a campfire. Campfires need fuel. Intention fades without ritual. The brain craves ceremony to mark the shift from drift to direction. A Japanese salaryman named Kenji bows to his desk every morning, whispers, serve with honor, then begins. The bow is 10 seconds. The intention lasts 12 hours. A surgeon scrubs for 3 minutes while visualizing the patient's heart beating strong. The scrub is protocol. The visualization is compass. Create your own. Light a candle, touch a stone, play a note on a phone chime. The body learns ritual direction. Direction sharpens with visualization. Athletes close eyes and see the basket swish, the ball curve, the finish line break. MRI studies show the same motor cortex fires whether you dunk the ball or imagine it. A pianist mentally rehearses a concerto and plays it cleaner on stage. The compass draws the map before the footsteps. A teacher named May visualized her toughest student smiling at a joke. She walked into class, told the joke, the boy laughed. The room shifted. The map had become the territory. Territory changes underfoot. Intention is not rigid, it is responsive. A sailor adjusts the sail when the wind shifts. A startup founder named Arya intended launch in 6 months. Supply chain delays blew the timeline. She adjusted. Launch when it's ready to change lives. The product shipped 9 months late and won an innovation award. The compass had listened to the wind. Listening requires silence. The loudest intentions drown in noise. A monastery in Bhutan rings a bell at dawn. Monks sit for 1 hour with the intention. Hear the silence beneath thought. EEGs show theta waves rising, creativity spiking later in the day. A CEO instituted silent starts. First 15 minutes of meetings, no talking, only written intentions on sticky notes. Ideas tripled. The compass needs quiet to hear true north. True north is not always comfortable. Intention often points through fear. A whistleblower named Chen intended tell the truth though it costs me. She leaked documents exposing corruption, lost her job, faced threats. Years later, the reforms she sparked saved thousands of lives. She kept a single sticky note on her mirror. Truth is my home. The compass had pointed through fire. The other side was dawn. Dawn reveals alignment. Intention aligns head, heart, hands. Head knows the why, heart feels the pull, hands do the work. Misalignment is friction. A doctor intended heal, but worked in a system that rewarded volume. Heart ached, hands rushed. She quit, opened a clinic with the intention. 1 patient, 1 hour. Revenue dipped, fulfillment soared. Patients healed faster. The compass had realigned the orchestra. Orchestras need conductors. Daily intention setting is the downbeat. A journal, a voice memo, a whisper in the shower. Today I intend. Make it specific, positive, present tense. I intend to listen fully to my partner. I intend to move my body with the joy. I intend to create one thing that scares me. The brain treats intention as done, deal. Dopamine primes the pump. A salesman set the intention. Every call is a conversation, not a pitch. Closing rate rose 18%. The compass had rewritten the script. Scripts evolve. Review intentions quarterly. What served? What drifted? A gardener intended grow food for the neighborhood. First year, tomatoes for 10 families. Second year, a community plot. Third year, a co-op. The compass expanded with the harvest. Harvests feed legacy. Intention outlives the intender. A teacher intended every child feels seen. She retired. Students returned decades later to say her glance at their drawing changed their life. The compass had pointed beyond her classroom. Beyond is where intention meets surrender. The compass points, the path appears. A hiker intended reach the summit by noon. Avalanche closed the trail. She intended stay safe, turned back, found a hidden meadow blooming with edelweiss. The compass had invited serendipity. The serendipity is intention's dance partner. Set the intention, release the how. A novelist intended write a story that heals. She outlined, deleted, outlined again. One night she dreamed a sentence. She woke, wrote it. The book poured out in 6 weeks. The compass had waited for the dream. Dreams speak in symbols, intention speaks back. A dreamer intended, understand my anger. That night, she dreamed of a red bird trapped in a cage. She woke, opened the cage in her mind, the bird flew into her chest and became warmth. Anger transmuted to passion. The compass had translated. Translation requires language. Speak intention aloud. The auditory cortex loops to the motor cortex. Words become action. A runner spoke, strong and steady with every footfall. Pace improved. A speaker intended, connect, not perform. She spoke the words backstage, stepped into light, forgot the script, told stories. The audience wept. The compass had found voice. Voice carries across distance. Collective intention is a choir. A town intended heal after the flood. They met in the ruined square. Each spoke one intention: rebuild the bakery, plant the park, teach the children. Volunteers poured in from 3 states. The town rose greener. The compass had become a cathedral. Cathedrals need maintenance. Intention rusts without attention. A monk intended wake at 4. He set the bell, slept through it, tried again. After 40 days the bell was unnecessary. The body woke itself. The compass had become habit. Habit is intention's shadow. Set the intention, repeat the action, the shadow lengthens. A meditator intended, meet each breath with kindness. 10,000 breaths later, kindness met her in traffic, in arguments, in dreams. The compass had become the air. Air is invisible until it moves. Intention moves the world 1 degree at a time. A girl intended, plant 1 tree. She planted, watered, posted a photo. Neighbors joined. 10 years later, the street was a canopy. The compass had grown a forest. Forests begin with a seed. Tonight, plant 1. Take a breath, close your eyes, ask, what do I intend for tomorrow? Let the first image, word, feeling rise. Write it down, speak it aloud. Place it where morning will see it. The compass is magnetized. The arrow trembles. The pass is narrow, the army vast, but the line is already drawn in the dirt. Step onto it, the stars are watching, the future is listening, the symphony is waiting for its cue. Chapter 8, The River of Connection. The first time I understood that loneliness could kill, I was sitting in a hospital corridor that smelled of bleach and burnt coffee. A nurse named Carla slid onto the bench beside me, white shoes squeaking. She had just finished a 12-hour shift, and her eyes were the color of storm clouds. "Mr. Alvarez in 312, she whispered. "He's dying of a broken heart." The chart said stage 4 lung cancer, but Carla shook her head. He stopped eating the day his wife died. No visitors, no calls. The cancer just hurried to fill the space she left. 2 days later, Mr. Alvarez slipped away while a janitor mopped the hall. His last words, according to the night aide, were, "Tell her I'm coming." I walked out into dawn light, feeling the river of connection that runs beneath every human life. Sometimes a torrent, sometimes a trickle, sometimes dammed, until the body itself cracks open to let it flow again. Connection is not a luxury, it is the current that carries oxygen to every cell of meaning. Neuroscientists have mapped it in the mirror neuron system, a web of cells that fires when you watch someone smile, wince, or reach for a glass. The same circuits light when you do the action yourself. Your brain does not fully distinguish mine from yours at the level of empathy. We are wired to flow into one another. Yet modern life builds levees, screens, schedules, square footage, until the river runs underground and we forget it is there until a flood or a drought reminds us. Long ago, on the banks of the Ganges, a ferryman named Vasudeva earned his living rowing pilgrims across the water. He spoke little, only listened to the river's 1,000 voices, laughter, grief, bargaining, silence. One evening a monk stepped aboard, robes saffron in the sunset. "Teach me the secret of peace," the monk demanded. Vasudeva pointed to the water. "Listen." The monk strained but heard only ripples. Years later, after the monk had wandered temples and texts, he returned. This time he sat quietly. The river spoke. A child's splash upstream, a woman's prayer downstream, the hush of fish beneath the boat. The monk wept. Vasudeva smiled. The river is never separate from its banks, nor from the sea it seeks. You are the river. The monk stayed, took up the oar, and ferried souls for the rest of his days. The current had carried the teaching home. Your mirror neurons are Vasudeva's oar. They dip into every interaction and pull you toward or away from the far bank. A study at UCLA followed 140 strangers paired to converse for 10 minutes. Those instructed to make eye contact and mirror posture showed synchronized heart rates and higher trust afterward. The river flowed. Those told to avoid eye contact left with elevated cortisol and lower rapport. The river dammed. 10 minutes, less time than a coffee break, shifted physiology. Connection is not poetry, it is hydraulics. Hydraulics begin with presence. A kindergarten teacher named Mei Ling greets each child at the door with a handshake and their name. Brain scans of 5-year-olds show that consistent greeting rituals increase oxytocin and decrease cortisol within weeks. By mid-year, the class functions like a single organism, sharing crayons, comforting tears, celebrating goals. Mei Ling calls it the morning merge. The river learns the shape of the bank. Banks erode without reciprocity. A marriage counselor in Oslo noticed that couples who kept score, "I did the dishes, you didn't call your mother," built resentment levees. She introduced a ritual. Every Sunday they sat knee to knee, and each named 3 things the other did that week that made life sweeter. No rebuttals, only thanks. Divorce predictions dropped 50% in her practice. The river needs 2 banks to flow. 2 banks create reflection. A tech founder named Liam installed a reflection wall in the office, whiteboard where anyone could write a gratitude or apology. Within a month, the wall was crowded. "Thanks for staying late to debug with me. Sorry I snapped in stand-up." Engineers who once ate at desks began lingering, reading, adding. Sick days fell 30%. The river mirrored itself and grew wider. Width requires depth. Surface chatter is a puddle. Vulnerability is the aquifer. A veterans group in Chicago meets in a church basement every Thursday. The rule: speak only in "I feel" statements, no advice. One Marine, silent for months, finally said, "I feel like a ghost in my own house." The room held the sentence like a fragile egg. Another veteran nodded. "I feel that too." Tears, then stories, then phone numbers exchanged. Suicide attempts in the group dropped to 0 that year. The river had gone underground and found others digging in the dark. Darkness is where connection often begins. A hospice volunteer named Ruth sits with the dying and asks, "Who do you need to forgive?" Or, "Who needs to forgive you?" She keeps a notebook of reconnections. A son flying in from Australia, a daughter reading a letter aloud, a wife whispering, "I was proud," into an ear that had waited 60 years. The river carries the message even when the body fails. Bodies fail, but the river remembers. Epigeneticists now trace how social connection alters gene expression across generations. Children of Holocaust survivors show altered stress hormones, not from trauma they lived, but from stories they heard at the knee. Grandmothers who sang lullabies during famine birthed grandchildren with stronger resilience genes. The river etches the banks for centuries. Centuries begin with a single drop. A barista in Seattle started writing one customer's name in bubble letters every shift. The customer, a widower, began timing his coffee for her line. One morning he brought a photo of his late wife at the same counter 30 years earlier. The barista taped it behind the register. Regulars noticed, shared their own photos. The wall became a gallery of love stories. The widower smiled for the first time in years. The river is made of drops. Drops travel farthest when unimpeded. A Japanese concept, ma, is the space between notes in music, the pause that lets the sound resonate. Conversation needs ma, A therapist in Cape Town teaches couples to pause 3 breaths after the other speaks. Heart rates sink, defensiveness drops. The river finds its channel in silence. Silence is portable. A New York subway experiment gave strangers noise-canceling headphones and a prompt, share something true. Without the city's roar, commuters opened, dreams, fears, jokes. One pair discovered they grew up on the same block in Queens, hadn't seen each other since childhood. They exited at the same stop, arms linked. The river surfaced in a tunnel. Tunnels are built by trust. Trust is the river's engineering. Neuroeconomist Paul Zak measured oxytocin levels during trust games. When one player sent money expecting reciprocation, oxytocin spiked in both. When the money was returned, the spike doubled. Betrayal crashed it. Trust is a chemical contract. I send, you receive, we both rise. A company in Denmark replaced performance reviews with trust circles. Every quarter, teams sit in a ring, and each answers, how can I support you? Bonuses are tied to collective goals. Revenue grew 22% annually. The river carried the load. Load sharing prevents floods. A village in Kerala faced monsoon devastation every year. Elders formed Kudumbashri, women's groups that meet weekly to pool savings and stories. When floods came, the groups activated. Boats, food, shelter coordinated in hours. Mortality dropped 80%. The river had tributaries. Tributaries converge in ritual. A family in Bogota lost their son to violence. Every anniversary they host a potluck where neighbors bring a dish and a memory of the boy. Laughter mingles with tears. The table grows longer each year. Grief becomes community. The river widens into a delta. Deltas feed oceans. Global connection is the ocean. A coder in Nairobi open-sourced an app to track water quality. A teenager in Manila improved the algorithm. A retiree in Glasgow funded sensors. Within a year, 400 cities used the data to clean rivers. The drop became a wave. Waves require rhythm. Circadian sociologist Till Roeneberg found that social jet lag, misaligned schedules, predicts depression better than sleep debt. Couples who share breakfast or bedtime have 40% lower divorce rates. Friends who walk the same route weekly report higher life satisfaction than those who text daily. The river loves cadence. Editor cadence heals addiction. A recovery program in Lisbon replaced AA's phone list with a connection menu. Coffee walk, museum visit, cooking night. Members choose one weekly. Relapse rates fell 60%. The river replaced the substance. Substances numb the river. Alcohol shrinks the prefrontal cortex. Loneliness does the same. A meta-analysis of 148 studies found social isolation carries the same mortality risk as smoking 15 cigarettes daily. The river starved. Is the body starved? Starvation ends with invitation. A librarian in Detroit noticed elderly patrons lingering after hours. She started tea at closing. 10 minutes. One question. What's one adventure you still want? Stories poured. Skydiving, learning violin, seeing the Grand Canyon. She created a bulletin board of wishes. Patrons paired up to make them real. One 82-year-old learned to tango. Another flew in a glider. The river carried octogenarians airborne. Airborne connection is play. A playground designer in Copenhagen built swings that face each other. Children must coordinate rhythm to soar. Conflict drops, laughter rises. The river learns physics through joy. Joy is contagious. Positive emotion spreads through 3 degrees of separation. Your joy lifts your friend's friend's friend. A happiness intervention at a call center trained agents in gratitude practices. Customer satisfaction rose 12%. The agent's friends reported better moods. The river rippled outward. Ripples require reflection, a mirror exercise. Sit with a partner, take turns speaking for 2 minutes while the other only reflects. What I hear you saying is, no advice, no story topping. After 10 rounds, partners report feeling seen for the first time. The river doubles back on itself. Doubling back prevents stagnation. Conflict is the river's aeration. A mediation center in Rwanda brings Hutu and Tutsi survivors together to rebuild homes side by side. Sweat and stories mix. Forgiveness emerges in the mortar. The river cleans itself through friction. Friction shapes stone. A sculptor in Carrara selects marble with natural cracks. The crack is where the soul enters, he says. Relationships with cracks, arguments, silences, betrayals are where depth carves in. The river polishes the stone. Polished stone reflects light. A nursing home in Amsterdam paired residents with kindergartners for weekly art. Finger paint, glue sticks, giggles. Dementia patients spoke full sentences for the first time in months. The river flowed upward and downward simultaneously. Simultaneity is the river's secret. You can be the drop in the ocean. A janitor in a Manhattan high-rise leaves origami cranes on desks with notes, "You are seen." Executives keep them for years. The river flows from the bottom up. Bottom-up connection scales. A CEO in Singapore replaced top-down town halls with river rounds. He visits one department monthly and asks, "What's flowing? What's blocked?" Ideas bubble up. Bureaucracy dissolves. The river carved new channels. Channels need maintenance. Digital connection can clog the flow 24/7. A family in Toronto instituted river nights. No screens, only board games, cooking, stargazing. Teenagers rolled eyes, then begged to host friends. The river ran clear. Clear water reveals fish. Vulnerability is the fish. A podcast host invites guests to share a failure. Listeners send thousands of letters. I thought I was alone. The river teems with shared humanity. Humanity includes animals. A prison in Washington pairs inmates with rescue dogs for training. Recidivism drops 45%. Dogs find homes. The river flows across species. Species converge in crisis. During Hurricane Harvey, a mosque opened to all faiths for shelter. Hindus cooked, Christians prayed, Muslims organized. The river ignored doctrine. But doctrine divides, story unites. A storytelling festival in Ireland invites Protestants and Catholics to share family tales on the same stage. Applause erases borders. The river sings in accents. Accents enrich the song. A language exchange app pairs refugees with locals. Coffee meets, friendships form, loneliness falls. The river learns new words. Words build bridges. A librarian in Ferguson started human library events. Borrow a person for 30 minutes. Ask anything. A cop, a trans teen, a former gang member. Prejudice evaporates in the asking. The river spans chasms. Chasms close with touch. A massage therapist in palliative care offers hand massages to families. Grief softens under warm oil. The river remembers skin. Skin remembers rhythm. A drummer in Havana teaches orphans to play congas. Pulse becomes purpose. The river finds tempo in heartbeats. Heartbeats sink in song. A choir in Sarajevo unites Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks. Rehearsals heal what politics broke. The river harmonizes. Harmony requires space. A Zen center in California hosts connection retreats. 48 hours of silence followed by 48 hours of dialogue. Participants leave speechless, then overflowing. The river needs stillness to swell. Stillness is portable. A commuter in Tokyo stands on the train, places hand on heart, breathes with the stranger beside him. No words, both arrive calmer. The river flows in subway cars. Subway cars carry dreams. A mural project invites riders to paint one tile with a hope. By year's end, the station is a mosaic. The river paints the walls. Oh! Walls fall when the river rises. A peace activist in Israel-Palestine plants olive trees on the line. Children from both sides water them. The river ignores checkpoints. Checkpoints are illusions. A virtual reality study lets users embody different races. Empathy scores rise 40%. The river flows through headsets. Headsets evolve into hugs. A hospital in Melbourne equips preemies with recordings of parents' heartbeats. Survival rates climb. The river returns to the womb. No. Wombs remind us we begin connected. Ultrasound shows fetuses smiling at mother's voice by week 24. The river is prenatal. Prenatal connection predicts lifelong health. Mothers who feel supported birth children with longer telomeres. The river writes DNA. DNA is the river's memory. A genealogist helps adoptees find birth families. Tears, reunions, belonging restored. The river remembers origins. Origins converge in death. A green burial ground in Devon plants a tree per body. Families return to picnic under branches that hold their loved ones. The river becomes forest. Forests breathe for the planet. A reforestation project in Ethiopia plants a tree for every online purchase. Shoppers track their tree via satellite. The river goes global. Warned away. Global connection is fragile. A single act of kindness can tip the scale. A boy in Syria draws a heart on a bomb shelter wall. A soldier sees it, lays down his gun, helps a family escape. The river carves canyons in war. War ends when the river is acknowledged. A veterans' peace circle invites former enemies to share meals. Hands that once held rifles now pass bread. The river dissolves uniforms. Uniforms are costumes. Underneath, the river is naked. A nudist retreat in France reports zero conflict in 20 years. The river flows when nothing hides. Hiding ends with confession. A church in Seoul offers confession booths where anyone can speak anonymously to a listener. Suicides drop 30% in the parish. The river absorbs shame. Shame evaporates in sunlight. A body positivity campaign posts unfiltered photos with stories. Followers flood the comments with their own. The river washes beauty standards. Standards are banks. The river reshapes. A school in Finland eliminates grades, focuses on peer feedback. Test scores rise. Anxiety falls. The river teaches itself. Teaching teaches itself. A hacker collective mentors at-risk youth in coding. Former delinquents become cybersecurity experts. The river redirects current. Current is measured in volts. A study of random acts of kindness, holding doors, paying for coffee, shows receivers' happiness rises 10%, givers 20%, observers 15%. The river electrifies witnesses. Witnesses become actors. A flash mob in Lisbon dances in the plaza. Passers-by join. Strangers embrace. The river choreographs spontaneously. Our spontaneity is the river's jazz. A jam session in New Orleans welcomes any instrument. Tourists sit in. Lifetimes connect in a single solo. The river improvises. Improvisation requires listening. A therapist teaches couples echo listening. Repeat partner's last sentence before responding. Arguments shorten. Intimacy lengthens. The river echoes. Echoes travel. A podcast listener in Alaska hears an episode on loneliness, calls a friend in Texas. The river spans continents. Continents are the river's dream. An astronaut on the ISS photographs Earth's thin blue line and weeps. The river seen from space has no borders. Borders are drawn in sand. A child on a Gaza beach writes peace in Arabic and Hebrew. Waves erase it, but a drone captures the moment. The image goes viral. The river writes in water. Water is memory. A Japanese tsunami survivor builds a phone booth to call the dead. Thousands visit, speak into the wind. Grief becomes communion. The river carries voices. Voices converge in song. A global choir sings hallelujah across time zones via Zoom. The river harmonizes through fiber optic. Fiber optic is the river's nervous system. A teenager in Kenya live streams her village's water crisis. Donors worldwide fund a well. The river flows at light speed. Light speed illuminates shadows. A journalist in Myanmar documents atrocities via encrypted chat. The world sees, the river exposes, exposure heals. A sexual assault survivor shares her story anonymously online. Thousands reply, "Me too." The river becomes a flood of solidarity. Solidarity topples systems. A union organizer in Alabama connects workers via WhatsApp. Amazon's anti-union campaign fails. The river organizes. Organization is the river's engineering. A mutual aid network in Puerto Rico, post-hurricane, delivers food by kayak. Government arrives weeks later. The river outpaces bureaucracy. Bureaucracy learns. A city in Iceland adopts citizen assemblies chosen by lottery. Policies reflect the river, not the elite. Elites drink from the same river. A billionaire funds clean water for 1 million people, then joins them to drink. The river equalizes. Equality is the river's destination. A school in South Africa pairs rich and poor students as pen pals. Stereotypes dissolve in letters. The river writes futures. Futures are written in children. A pediatrician prescribes parent playdates alongside vaccines. Loneliness drops. Resilience rises. The river inoculates. Inoculation begins at home. A father turns off the game, asks his son, "How was your heart today?" The boy pauses, answers. The river flows from couch to soul. Souls meet in dreams. A lucid dreamer intends to meet a friend. They report the same meadow. The river flows in sleep. Sleep restores the river. A couple sleeps, holding hands. Heart rates sink. Nightmares decrease. The river cradles. Cradles rock generations. A grandmother teaches her granddaughter to skip stones. Each plunk is a connection across time. The river skips none. Skipping stones teaches physics and faith. A physicist calculates the perfect angle. A monk trusts the wrist. Both watch the stone dance. The river marries science and spirit. Spirit is the river's source. A pilgrim at Lourdes touches the water, feels her mother's hand. The river remembers touch. Touch is the river's language. A blind masseuse reads bodies like braille. Clients leave lighter. The river speaks in pressure. Pressure shapes diamonds. A coal miner sings to his crew underground. Fear becomes song. The river mines beauty. Beauty is the river's gift. A street artist paints murals of local elders. Passers-by stop, smile, speak to strangers. The river paints community. Community is the river's mouth. A town in Japan celebrates Connection Day. No shops open, only porches, tea, stories. Crime is zero that day. The river rests in itself. Rest is the river's wisdom. A farmer lets a field lie fallow. Soil regenerates, yield doubles. The river teaches Sabbath. Sabbath is portable. A New Yorker unplugs every Sunday, walks the bridge, counts sailboats. The river flows in footsteps. Footsteps leave prints. A tracker in the Kalahari reads connection in broken twigs, scuffs, dung. The river writes in earth. Earth holds the river. A gardener composts kitchen scraps with neighbors' leaves. Tomatoes grow sweeter. The river recycles. Recycling is the river's economy. A swap meet in Lisbon trades clothes, skills, bread. Money stays in pockets. Connection fills hands. The river barters. Barter builds trust. A fisherman trades fish for a carpenter's chair. Both eat, both sit. The river furnishes homes. Homes are the river's hearth. A refugee family in Jordan invites neighbors for tea. Laughter crosses languages. The river warms tents. Tents become temples. A yoga teacher in a camp leads sunrise salutes. Bodies bend, hearts open. The river prays in downward dog. Prayer is the river's song. A cathedral in Paris opens for interfaith meditation. Strangers sit shoulder to shoulder. The river forgets names. Names are the river's stories. A dementia ward plays residents' favorite songs. Memories surface. Families weep with joy. The river sings the past. Past meets future in children. A time capsule in a Melbourne school holds letters to 2050. Kids write to their older selves and to strangers' grandchildren. The river mails hope. Hope is the river's current. A climate activist plants mangroves with school kids. Roots hold soil, fish return, carbon sinks, the river cools the planet. Planets are the river's dream. An astronomer shares telescope images with prison inmates. Eyes that never left concrete see galaxies. The river expands vision. Vision becomes action. A former inmate studies astrophysics, teaches kids in his old neighborhood to stargaze. The river orbits. Orbits return. A sailor circumnavigates, logs every sunrise shared with crew. The river circles Earth in light. Light is the river's essence. A candlelight vigil in Hong Kong links hands across streets. Police lower weapons. The river illuminates. Illumination ends in darkness. A cave explorer in Vietnam turns off headlamps. The group holds hands, feels heartbeats. The river thrives in black. Black is where the river begins. A midwife catches a baby in a power outage, guided by grandmother's songs. The river delivers life. Palestra life is the river's purpose. A centenarian in Okinawa credits longevity to ikigai, reason to rise. Hers, tending neighbors' gardens. The river flows at 100.100 is the river's chorus. A choir of centenarians sings folk songs. Audiences weep, then join. The river spans ages. Ages end where they began. A baby's first laugh triggers laughter in every adult within earshot. The river loops. Loops are the river's eternity. A grief circle passes a stone. Each speaker holds it, speaks, passes. The stone warms. The river holds the circle. Circles close the chapter. Tonight, draw one, phone a friend. Meet a stranger, hug a child, water a plant, thank a cashier, forgive someone, forgive yourself. One drop, the river is waiting. It has always been you. Chapter 9, The Forge of Resilience. The first scar I ever studied belonged to a blacksmith named Matteo, who worked in a village tucked between the Andes and the Pacific. His left forearm carried a pale lightning bolt. From wrist to elbow, the legacy of a molten shard that leapt from the anvil when he was 16. Asked if it still hurt, he laughed, flexed the muscle, and the scar rippled like a river over stone. Pain left the day I learned the metal was teaching me rhythm, he said. Now the scar is my metronome. When I swing the hammer, I feel the old burn. And remember, strike when the iron is hot, rest when it cools. The forge never lies. That day he let me hold the hammer. It was heavier than guilt, lighter than fear. I struck once, twice, sparks flew like startled fireflies. Matteo nodded. Every miss shapes the blade, he said. Every burn teaches the hand. The forge is not a place. It is a conversation between heat and steel, between pressure and possibility. Resilience is the blade that emerges, scarred, flexible, sharp enough to cut through tomorrow. Your nervous system is Matteo's forge, hammering experience into strength. Neuroplasticity is the fire, adversity the hammer, rest the quench. Most of us fear the heat, dodge the hammer, skip the quench, and wonder why we bend or break. The resilient do not avoid the forge, they learn its language. They know that stress, properly dosed, is the bellows that fans the flame of growth. Hans Selye, the father of stress research, distinguished distress, chronic, erosive, from eustress, acute, adaptive. The difference is not the stressor, but the story you tell while the hammer falls. A Navy SEAL candidate, enduring Hell Week, tells himself, "This is forging me." A student failing a midterm tells herself, "This is revealing my gaps." Same heat, different blade. Long ago in the Mongolian steppe, A girl named Kulan lost her family to a winter blizzard. She was 8, alone with a single mare and a yurt half buried in snow. Hunger clawed, wolves circled, the wind screamed like 1,000 ghosts. Kulan remembered her father's words. When the storm takes everything, listen for the one thing it leaves. She listened. The mare's breath steamed in the dark. Kulan curled against the animal's flank, felt the heartbeat, matched her own to it. She survived by drinking mare's milk, burning saddle leather for warmth, singing lullabies to the horse until spring. When traders found her, she was thin but unbroken, leading the mare by a rope braided from her own hair. The tribe called her Storm Child. She grew into a leader who taught riders to read wind the way sailors read waves. Her scar was invisible, but every decision carried its metronome. Strike when hot, rest when cool. The forge had spoken in blizzard. Your hypothalamus is Kulan's mare, regulating temperature, hunger, fear. When adversity strikes, it releases cortisol to mobilize energy, then expects you to move, fight, flee, or tend and befriend. Chronic stress is the blizzard without spring. Cortisol never ebbs. Inflammation smolders, telomeres shorten. Resilience is the rope braided from hair. Small, deliberate actions that tether you to life. A firefighter trapped in a burning building with seconds of air does not panic. He crawls low, feels for heat, finds the window. The forge is literal. A single mother facing eviction does not freeze. She calls one friend, searches one listing, braids one rope. The forge is financial. The principle is the same. Move with the heat, not against it. Movement is the quench. After stress, the parasympathetic system must douse the flame. Deep breathing, sleep, touch, laughter, each is water on steel. A study of Holocaust survivors found that those who rebuilt families had lower lifetime cortisol than those who remained isolated. The quench was connection, a modern parallel. After 9/11s, New Yorkers who attended community vigils showed faster heart rate recovery than those who watched alone. The forge needs witnesses. Witnesses amplify the hammer. Social resilience is forged in we. A rugby team stranded in the Andes after a plane crash survived 72 days by sharing body heat, rationing chocolate, telling stories. When rescue came, they carried the dead down the mountain, so no one was left behind. The forge was ice, the blade was brotherhood. A corporate team facing bankruptcy holds a failure feast. Each member brings a dish representing a mistake, tells the story, eats. Laughter replaces shame, ideas spark. The forge is red ink, the blade is innovation. Innovation requires flexibility. Steel that is too brittle shatters, too soft it bends. Resilience is the alloy, 90% strength, 10% give. A bamboo grove withstands typhoons by bending to the ground, then rising. A CEO fired after a merger spends one day grieving, then rewrites his LinkedIn, available for what's next. Within a month, he consults for 3 former competitors. The forge was humiliation, the blade was curiosity. Curiosity is the spark. Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in Auschwitz, noticed that prisoners who asked, "What can I learn today?" survived longer than those asking, "Why me?" The forge was barbed wire. The blade was meaning. A cancer patient named Rosa kept a beauty journal. One beautiful thing noticed daily. Chemo nurse's freckles, sunset through IV pole, taste of strawberry. She outlived her prognosis by 3 years. The forge was poison. The blade was attention. Attention shapes the grain. Woodworkers read the grain to avoid splits. Resilient minds read the stress to avoid fracture. A technique called stress inoculation exposes soldiers to controlled chaos, loud noises, sleep deprivation, ethical dilemmas, so the forge is familiar. Civilians can self-inoculate, cold showers, public speaking, fasting. Each is a controlled burn. A writer afraid of rejection sends one query daily for 30 days. By day 30, the forge feels like home. Acceptance letters arrive. The blade is courage. Courage is tempered in failure. Thomas Edison's 10,000 light bulb attempts were 10,000 hammer strikes. Each dewed filament taught heat tolerance, vacuum pressure, cost. The forge was darkness, the blade was light. A startup founder keeps a failure wall. Every rejected pitch, every crashed prototype. Investors see the wall and fund the grit. The forge is no, the blade is next. Next is the quench of hope. Neuroscientist Richard Davidson found that the left prefrontal cortex lights up in resilient people anticipating reward. Hope is not delusion. It is the brain's prediction of possibility. A prisoner on death row carves a chess set from soap, plays imaginary opponents, teaches guards, execution stays come and go, the chess set outlives him. The forge was bars, the blade was strategy. Strategy is forged in micro moments. The average person faces 3 to 5 stresses daily. Traffic, email, spilled coffee. Each is a mini forge. Respond with a 3-breath reset. Inhale, this is hard. Hold, I can handle. Exhale, what's next? The hammer falls, the blade sharpens. A barista does this during rush hour. Tips rise because smiles stay steady. The forge is steam, the blade is grace. Grace is the alloy of self-compassion. Kristin Neff's research shows that self-critical people recover slower from setbacks. Self-compassionate people bounce faster. The inner voice is the hammer's rhythm. I'm stupid cracks the steel. I'm learning tempers it. A gymnast falls off the beam, whispers, again kinda, nails the dismount. The forge was gravity, the blade was growth. Growth is visible in the scar. Post-traumatic growth is real. 70% of trauma survivors report deeper relationships, new possibilities, or spiritual awakening. The forge was loss, the blade was wisdom. A widow plants a garden where her husband's ashes rest. Roses bloom redder than ever. The forge was grief, the blade was beauty. Beauty is the final quench. After the hammer, after the heat, the blade is plunged into oil, the sizzle is release. Resilience needs ritual release. Dance, song, tears, silence. A soldier returns from war, attends a drum circle, pounds until hands bleed, then weeps. The forge was gunfire, the quench was rhythm. Rhythm is portable. A commuter, stuck in traffic, drums on the steering wheel, sings off key, arrives calmer. The forge was gridlock, the quench was melody. A nurse after a code blue steps into the stairwell, hums a lullaby, returns to the floor steady. The forge was death, the quench was memory. Memory is the forge's archive. The hippocampus stores lessons, the amygdala stores threats. Resilience rewrites the archive. A technique called memory reconsolidation reactivates a fear memory, then pairs it with safety. A veteran smells diesel, flashes to IEDs, then deliberately smells it while holding his daughter's hand. The archive updates diesel fatherhood. The forge was explosion, the blade was presence. Presence is the forge's fire. Mindfulness meditation thickens the prefrontal cortex, shrinks the amygdala. Monks enduring ice baths show lower pain perception because they observe sensation without story. A mother in labor breathes through contractions, notices the wave rise and fall, pushes at the crest. The forge was pain, the blade was power. Power is shared. A community garden in Detroit turns vacant lots into food. Residents weed, plant, harvest together. Crime drops 40% in the blocks. The forge was blight, the blade was bounty. Bounty is the forge's gift. Resilience is not survival, it is surplus. The blacksmith gives away knives sharper than he needs. The survivor mentors the lost. The forge was lack, the blade was legacy. Legacy is forged in children. A father teaches his son to weld. Sparks fly, fear rises, pride follows. The boy grows, teaches his daughter. The forge spans generations. Generations are the forge's echo. A Holocaust survivor's granddaughter has lower stress hormones because bedtime stories included We rebuilt. The forge was ashes, the blade was narrative. Narrative is the forge's tongue. Tell the story of the scar, and it becomes a map. A burn victim speaks to school kids. This is where I learned to ask for help. Shyness melts, questions pour. The forge was flame, the blade was voice. Voice is the forge's song. A choir of cancer patients sings through chemo. Notes waver, then soar. Nurses cry in the hallway. The forge was poison, the blade was harmony. Harmony is the forge's rest. After the hammer, the blade is polished. Resilience needs Sabbath. A farmer rotates crops. A CEO takes Fridays offline. A student naps after exams. The forge cools. The blade gleams. Gleam is the forge's mirror. Look into it daily. What did I survive today? What did it teach? A journal, a whisper, a glance at the scar. The forge speaks back. Speak back tonight. Find your scar, visible or not. Touch it, thank it, ask what it wants to become. The forge is still hot. The hammer is in your hand. The blade is waiting. Strike. Chapter 10. The Eternal Flame of Creation. The first spark I ever chased was a firefly in my grandmother's backyard. On a July night so thick with heat, the air felt like warm velvet, and I, barely 5, ran barefoot across the grass with a mason jar, convinced that if I could catch just one glowing dot, I would hold summer forever. But every time my fingers closed around the light, it slipped away, leaving only the faint green afterimage on my palms and the laughter of my grandmother calling from the porch. Let it go, Caro. The light isn't for keeping, it's for following. And so I did, following the fireflies deeper into the dark until the jar was forgotten and the night itself became the jar, vast and pulsing with 1,000 tiny suns. And in that moment I understood that creation is not capture but communion. Not possession, but participation, the eternal flame that burns in every human chest, waiting to be fanned by wonder, fueled by courage, and offered to the world as both gift and invitation. And now, as we reach the final chapter of this journey together, imagine that same backyard stretched across the cosmos, every star a firefly, every galaxy a mason jar. And you no longer the child chasing but the adult holding the match, ready to light your own corner of the dark, for creation is the ultimate alchemy of the human spirit. The place where thought becomes form, where pain becomes art, where silence becomes symphony, and where the reprogrammed mind finally steps onto the stage of reality, not as a spectator, but as the playwright, director, actor, and audience all at once, and the science bears witness. When you engage in creative flow, the brain's default mode network quiets while the executive network sings, dopamine surges like applause, and the prefrontal cortex weaves new connections faster than any meditation or therapy. Because creation is the mind's native language, spoken fluently by children and rediscovered by those brave enough to pick up the crayon, the hammer, the pen, the brush, the body, the voice, the dream, and say yes to the blank page, the empty room, the unbroken silence, the uncharted tomorrow. And long before fMRI machines glowed with the colors of inspiration, a potter named Akio sat at his wheel in a Kyoto hut, hands slick with clay, spinning bowls that held light like water, and when apprentices asked his secret, he would press a thumb into the wet rim and say, "The bowl is already inside the clay. I only remove what is not the bowl." And for 40 years, he threw away 9 out of 10 pots, keeping only the one that sang when struck. Until one winter morning the perfect bowl emerged, so thin it was translucent, so balanced it spun on a fingertip for a full minute, and the emperor himself drank tea from it and declared the steam tasted of mountains. But Akio bowed and said, "The bowl is not mine. I only followed the flame inside the clay, And that flame is the same one that burns in you, the creative intelligence that sculpted your first stick figure family, that hummed your first made-up song, that built forts from couch cushions and stories from bedtime fears, and somewhere along the way the world handed you rules, color inside the lines, sing in tune, build to code, dream within budget, and the flame dimmed to a pilot light, but it never went out because creation is not a talent some are born with and others are not. It is the birthright of every human nervous system encoded in the same DNA that grew your fingers to grasp, your eyes to see pattern, your ears to hear harmony, and your heart to ache for expression, and modern laboratories confirm what Akio knew by feel. When you create, the brain releases a cocktail of neurotransmitters that rivals any drug. Dopamine for reward, serotonin for calm, oxytocin for connection, endorphins for joy, and the vagus nerve hums at a frequency that lowers inflammation, lengthens telomeres, and literally extends life. While the act of making something with your hands activates the cerebellum in ways that thinking alone never does, knitting fine motor skills to emotional regulation so that the potter's steady hands become the meditator's steady mind, and the painter's bold stroke becomes the speaker's bold truth, and the dancer's leap becomes the dreamer's courage, lengthens telomeres, and literally extends life. While the act of making something with your hands activates the cerebellum in ways that thinking alone never does, knitting fine motor skills to emotional regulation so that the potter's steady hands become the meditator's steady mind, and the painter's bold stroke becomes the speaker's bold truth, and the dancer's leap becomes the dreamer's courage, lengthens telomeres, and literally extends life. While the act of making something with your hands activates the cerebellum in ways that thinking alone never does, knitting fine motor skills to emotional regulation so that the potter's steady hands become the meditator's steady mind, and the painter's bold stroke becomes the speaker's bold truth, and the dancer's leap becomes the dreamer's courage to fall and rise again, and the stories abound. A janitor in Boston who sketched subway riders in the margins of his logbook until a passenger recognized her portrait and bought it for $100, then $1,000, then commissioned a mural that now wraps the station in color and pays his rent, lengthens telomeres, and literally extends life. While the act of making something with your hands activates the cerebellum in ways that thinking alone never does, knitting fine motor skills to emotional regulation so that the potter's steady hands become the meditator's steady mind, and the painter's bold stroke becomes the speaker's bold truth, and the dancer's leap becomes the dreamer's courage to fall and rise again, and the stories abound. A janitor in Boston who sketched subway riders in the margins of his logbook until a passenger recognized her portrait and bought it for $100, then $1,000, then commissioned a mural that now wraps the station in color and pays his rent. Fine motor skills to emotional regulation so that the potter's steady hands become the meditator's steady mind, and the painter's bold stroke becomes the speaker's bold truth, and the dancer's leap becomes the dreamer's courage to fall and rise again, and the stories abound. A janitor in Boston who sketched subway riders in the margins of his logbook until a passenger recognized her portrait and bought it for $100, then $1,000, then commissioned a mural that now wraps the station in color and pays his rent. Programming, the moment the thought becomes thing, the fear becomes fuel, the wound becomes window, the silence becomes song, and the ordinary becomes sacred. And to live this truth, begin small, begin now. Begin where you are with what you have, because the flame does not wait for perfect conditions. It waits only for the yes, and the yes can be a pencil sketch on a napkin, a hummed tune in the shower, a new spice in tonight's soup, a text that says, "I see you," a dance in the kitchen while the kettle boils, a question asked instead of assumed, a risk taken instead of regretted, a failure shared instead of hidden, a dream spoken instead of buried. And each yes fans the flame a little higher, until one day you look back and see that the fireflies you chased as a child were leading you not to capture light but to become it, and the jar you carried was never meant to hold the glow but to reflect it outward, and the night was never dark but pregnant with possibility, and the grandmother on the porch was never calling you back but sending you forward, and the spark you feel now, reading these words, is the same spark that lit the first cave painting, that launched the first boat, that wrote the first poem, that coded the first program, that planted the first seed, that forgave the first hurt, that loved the first stranger, and it is yours to tend, yours to share, yours to pass on, and the world is waiting not for perfection, not for genius, not for permission, but for your particular light, your unrepeatable note, your singular stroke. Because the eternal flame of creation is not a solo performance, it is a bonfire built by billions of hands, and your hand that forgave the first hurt, that loved the first stranger, and it is yours to tend, yours to share, yours to pass on, and the world is waiting not for perfection, not for genius, not for permission, but for your particular light, your unrepeatable note, your singular stroke. Because the eternal flame of creation is not a solo performance, it is a bonfire built by billions of hands, and your hand is needed, your voice is needed, your weird, messy, glorious, scarred, scared, hopeful human self is needed, and the reprogramming is complete when you step into the circle, add your log to the fire, and watch the shadows dance. And the story ends not with a period, but with an ellipse. Genius, not for permission, but for your particular light, your unrepeatable note, your singular stroke. Because the eternal flame of creation is not a solo performance, it is a bonfire built by billions of hands, and your hand is needed, your voice is needed, your weird, messy, glorious, scarred, scared, hopeful human self is needed, and the reprogramming is complete when you step into the circle, add your log to the fire, and watch the shadows dance. And the story ends not with a period, but with an ellipse, because creation has no finale. Only the next blank page, the next sunrise, the next breath, the next yes. And so I invite you now here in this moment to close your eyes and feel the flame in your chest, to name one small act of creation you will offer the world before the sun sets again, to speak it aloud if you can, to write it if you must, to draw it, dance it, sing it, code it, cook it, plant it, forgive it, love it into being, and then to open your eyes and begin, because the fireflies are still flying, the clay is still wet, the page is still blank, the night is still young, and the eternal flame is still yours to carry. And if this audiobook has lit even one small spark in you, and is needed, your voice is needed, your weird, messy, glorious, scarred, scared, hopeful human self is needed, and the reprogramming is complete when you step into the circle, add your log to the fire, and watch the shadows dance. And the story ends not with a period, but with an ellipse, and is needed, your voice is needed, your weird, messy, glorious, scarred, scared, hopeful human self is needed, and the reprogramming is complete when you step into the circle, add your log to the fire, and watch the shadows dance. And the story ends not with a period, but with an ellipse, because creation has no finale. Only the next blank page, the next sunrise, the next breath, the next yes. And so I invite you now here in this moment to close your eyes and feel the flame in your chest, to name one small act of creation you will offer the world before the sun sets again, to speak it aloud if you can, to write it if you must, to draw it, dance it, sing it, code it, cook it, plant it, forgive it, love it into being, and then to open your eyes and begin, because the fireflies are still flying, the clay is still wet, the page is still blank, the night is still young, and the eternal flame is still yours to carry. And If this audiobook has lit even one small spark in you, then please like the video, comment below with your creation, share it with someone who needs light, subscribe for more journeys into the mind's infinite workshop, and together let us keep the bonfire roaring, because the world is not done and neither are you, and the best is yet to be made.